Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in New York on June 23, 1993, as the only child of Joshua and Sandy Greenberg. At the time of the events, she was 27 years old and living in Philadelphia. Ellen grew up in a family filled with love and was a cheerful, outgoing girl. In high school, she played softball and golf, excelling as a competitive athlete. She was well-liked and had many friends. Her mother said that she was a special person, able to connect people with each other. After graduating from college, Ellen earned a degree in communications from the University of Pennsylvania. Even so, she felt this was not her true passion. As a result, she took evening classes at the university and eventually earned a teaching degree. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job as a first-grade teacher in Philadelphia. In 2008, Ellen met Samuel Goldberg, the son of a famous family in the area. They started dating soon after. Deeply in love, they soon decided to live together. By 2011, they were engaged and planning to marry in August. Ellen was thrilled and joyfully prepared for the wedding, trying on her dress and sending out invitations. She had no idea that incident would soon take a strange and unexpected turn. On January 26, 2011, while Ellen was at work, Philadelphia had a major snowstorm, prompting the school to close early. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Samuel. At around 5 p.m., Samuel went to the gym, he unaware it would be the last time he saw Ellen alive. When he returned at 5:45 p.m., he found the apartment door locked from the inside. He knocked repeatedly, called Ellen's name, phoned her multiple times, and sent 9 text messages, but received no response. Then, he asked the security guard for help to break down the door, but the guard refused, citing rules against leaving post. Determined, he broke down the door himself. Inside, he discovered a horrific scene. Ellen was sitting on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinets, with multiple wounds. He immediately called 911. The operator instructed him to check if Ellen was breathing and to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, he noticed a knife stuck in her chest, preventing him from starting resuscitation. Tragically, Ellen had already passed away. When the police arrived to inspect the scene, they found that the apartment's entrance had not been forced, and inside, everything appeared to be in order, with no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was secured in the usual way until Samuel broke it down, making it unlikely that an intruder had entered. The police also observed that Ellen's hands had no defensive wounds. Despite her multiple injuries, it seemed improbable that she had inflicted them on herself. Nevertheless, waiting for the forensic examination results, the police concluded that Ellen had ended her life, even though there was no note explaining her actions. Additionally, there were fruits on the kitchen table, indicating that Ellen might have been planning to make a fruit salad when she supposedly decided to end her life. The police took Samuel to the station to provide testimony. By this time, Ellen's parents had received the sad news over the phone. They lived in Harrisburg, a 2-hour drive away. When they learned that their only daughter had passed away, they completely collapsed. The very next day, information about Ellen's death has changed. The autopsy revealed she had 20 wounds, 10 on the front and 10 on the neck from the back. Medical examiners emphasized that these injuries showed that this was a murder. She also had bruises on various parts of her body, both recent and older, making it hard to believe she could inflict neck and head wounds on herself from behind. Especially because at least 2 of these wounds were almost fatal and left her unconscious. Additionally, it takes a great deal of force to cause these injuries, especially head injuries. She was found with a knife stuck in her chest after already sustaining 19 injuries. Could she have done all of this by herself? Despite the evidence that has been found, the police disagreed with autopsy officers' conclusion. Authorities announced that Ellen ended her life. They came to this conclusion because they found no signs of anyone else being there. The door was locked from the inside and the neighbors heard no strange sounds, only Samuel's screams. Additionally, DNA analysis of the knife revealed only Ellen's fingerprints. The bruises on her were explained by the police as injuries from playing sports, even though she had not participated in any sports for several years. Doctors also checked Ellen's mental health and learned from her parents that recently, she has been dealing with anxiety. She had been prescribed 2 medications, both known to have side effects that may cause negative thoughts or behaviors. However, her psychiatrist, Len, stated that she showed no signs of end-her-life thoughts. 2 weeks before the incident, when they met, she seemed fine. In addition, the psychiatrist said had never heard Ellen say that anyone had treated her cruelly. Her family also confirmed this. They described Ellen as a good-natured and cheerful. Her loved ones couldn't believe she would harm herself, as she was happy, preparing for her upcoming wedding, and had even tried on her dress and sent out invitations just days before the incident. Ellen's mother and friends admit that she has been feeling anxious and stressed due to work and wedding preparations. However, they consider this to be normal. The thought that she would harm herself just before her wedding was completely out of character. There was a conflict between the forensic medical examination, which ruled it as murder, and the police, who believed Ellen harmed herself. To resolve this, the doctor decided to send a sample from Ellen's spine to a neurologist at the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau. This was to verify the cause of death. Because if one of her severe neck wounds had penetrated deep enough to reach the spinal cord, causing paralysis, she wouldn't have been able to inflict further wounds. This indicated that someone else was responsible for Ellen's death. 3 months after the incident, the medical examiner retracted his murder hypothesis, suggesting instead that Ellen's neck wounds were not severe enough to cause paralysis and that she could have inflicted them on herself. Ellen's parents were not given a clear explanation for this change in the investigation's direction. They described Ellen as squeamish, noting that she avoided even piercing her ears a second time due to her low pain tolerance, making it hard for them to believe she could harm herself. Despite this, the authorities closed the case. Refusing to accept this decision, Ellen's family decided to pursue their own investigation. They hired top experts, including forensic specialists Kirill Klin and Henry Lee, to consider the evidence and the autopsy report. These experts cast doubt on the police investigation report that Ellen did this to herself. In 2012, Henry noted that the likelihood of murder Ellen is significant. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht pointed out that statistically, women rarely use sharp objects to end her life and seldom harm themselves through clothing. On the other hand, Bren, a seasoned detective, investigated Ellen's death. After reviewing the footage, Bren claimed to notice that the bloodstains did not match the position in which Ellen was found, as she was sitting and leaning against the kitchen cabinets. However, there was a trail of blood running horizontally from her nose to her ear, and the blood splatter on her shoes indicated that she was standing when she suffered the injuries. All of this led he to assume that the scene of the incident and the position of the body had been altered. Although Ellen's parents tried, the lawyer failed to change the version of incident, as it would have been necessary to present more compelling evidence. Therefore, the case did not progress and remained unchanged until 2015. Andre, an assistant attorney, did not officially take on the case. However, he was intrigued by the unusual circumstances and decided to review the file to understand what drove Ellen to her actions. Ellen's fiancé, Samuel, found her, and he told the police that the door was locked from the inside, which forced him to kick it open. Andre noted in a photograph from the scene that the lock was a simple hotel-style latch. This type of latch can be locked from both the inside and the outside by turning a screw. An analyst mentioned that this kind of latch typically cannot be broken by a kick without dislodging the door from its frame. Yet, the only damage observed on the door was a missing screw. Additionally, the police considered the fact that Ellen had no defensive wounds. It was unclear in which order her injuries occurred, but the final one was undoubtedly to the heart, where the knife was found. If one of the neck wounds had damaged her bone marrow, she would not have had any opportunity to defend herself. One of Ellen's head wounds, which indicated she was attacked from behind, caught Andre's attention. He raised these concerns with the forensic expert, who said a neurologist had examined Ellen and found no injury. He then asked for an official report to confirm there was no spinal injury, only to be told that no such report existed. It had been lost, suggesting it was more of a rumor that no one had substantiated. At the time, there was no neurologist in the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau, so Dr. Adams was brought in. She allegedly examined Ellen's spine and found no damage. However, it later emerged that no record existed of Dr. Adams being asked to perform this examination. In a 2018 interview, Dr. Adams claims that she did not examine Ellen's spine. Following this, Andre contacted a private investigator for the Greenberg family and recommended hiring a private neurologist. He discovered that Ellen's spine sample was still held at the Forensic Bureau, which seemed unnecessary. The family took this advice and hired Dr. Ross. He concluded in a report that Ellen's spinal cord was damaged by 2 severe wounds on her neck, making it impossible for her to inflict further injuries on herself. At the same time, Andre realized that the data the police had was provided by Samuel, Ellen's fiancé, who was at the scene. This was the only account of what happened in the apartment. Samuel said he had not been with Ellen for 45 minutes, and when he returned, he couldn't open the door. Neighbors said they heard Samuel screaming and calling Ellen's name through the door. Samuel said he became worried and started calling Ellen on the phone, sending her 9 text messages. When he got no response, he went downstairs to ask the building security guard if had any tools to open the door, but the guard refused to help. Later, Samuel claimed he went downstairs several more times, trying to persuade the guard to help him break down the door. In his official statement to the police, he said the guard was with him when he kicked the door open and entered. However, the guard told both the police and Ellen's family that he never left his post and did not accompany Samuel into the apartment. Additionally, the guard noted that Samuel, who claimed to have been at the gym, was wearing boots instead of sneakers. On the other hand, Samuel called 911 at 6:33 p.m., which means that an hour had already passed since he returned to the apartment and attempted to contact Ellen. This is very strange when analyzed. Let's think, he goes to the gym for half an hour. Later, when he returned home, he called Ellen to open the door, but she did not answer him. He shouts her name, tries to call her on the phone and sends her 9 text messages. How long should it take to realize that something is wrong? 10 to 20, maybe 30 minutes, but not an hour. Another strange thing that Andre discovered is that Samuel, before calling 911, made 2 calls, one to his parents and another to his uncle, who is a lawyer. Moreover, they arrived at the scene before the emergency services, and it was Samuel's parents who informed Ellen's parents about what happened. One thing is clear, no one would react in the same way as Samuel. Anyone would ask for help as soon as possible to try to save the life of the person they love, right? Andre listened to Samuel's call to 911, and he was surprised to hear Samuel speak in a calm tone. Even as Samuel said things like my God, his fiancée, there is blood, his voice remained steady. When the emergency services worker asked him to describe the situation, he ignored the request and instead talked about his trip to the gym and his return home. When they instructed him to perform CPR, Samuel asked, "Does he really need to do this?" After spending 2 or 3 minutes supposedly performing CPR, he suddenly told they that he had just found a knife stuck in Ellen's chest. Remarkably, although he was beside her the whole time, but before that he had not seen it. This was no small tool, but a 10-inch long meat cleaver. It was clearly visible. After discovering it, he told they that Ellen must have fallen on the knife. Following this, Samuel was taken to the police station to give a statement. He did so only in the presence of his lawyer and provided a very brief statement. After that, he refused to speak to detectives again, despite their repeated attempts to question him. It seemed there was no way to get him to talk. These things made Ellen's family believe that she was murdered. A neurologist hired by Ellen's family discovered a bone marrow perforation and also found signs of strangulation and bruising. However, many researchers reviewed the footage at the scene and were surprised to see only a small amount of blood. Ellen had 20 injuries, which raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been tampered with. However, the investigation did not conduct any crucial tests. The police did not even examine the trash after arriving at the scene. They simply observed and assumed she had died naturally and without protecting the scene. Additionally, the day after this tragic incident, Samuel's uncle, cousin, and brother visited the apartment, supposedly to retrieve a suit. They took Samuel's laptop, Ellen's laptop, and her cell phone. The police only seized these items on January 29, 3 days later. Upon examination, the laptops showed search queries about ending one's life. Yet, the official report filed in April 2011 did not mention these searches. Ellen's parents and friends slightly changed their views about Samuel after the incident. They never labeled he as a suspect or culprit, but they did have doubts. They realized they had noticed changes in Ellen's behavior weeks before the incident but didn't think much of it at the time. Her friends observed that she started consulting Samuel on every decision, which was unusual for her. Ellen, once a happy girl, had become worried and insecure. One day, she told her parents she wanted to quit her job and move back home. She assuring them it had nothing to do with Samuel and she was fine. Her parents told her she could come home whenever she needed and advised her to seek help for her anxiety. In 2019, Deputy Coroner and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences Gregory MacDonald presented a report supporting the police's version of incident. He stated that Ellen had inflicted superficial wounds on herself, as people often start with shallow cuts before going deeper. However, the deep wounds and marks that looked like signs of an attack also made him suspicious. After the incident, Samuel continued to contact the Greenberg family for a year, but their relationship eventually faded. He later sent them an email announcing his wedding. Today, he is married, has 2 children and lives a normal life, completely unrelated to the Greenberg family. The Greenberg family and their attorney have filed a lawsuit against the medical examiner, who performed the autopsy, and the Philadelphia County Coroner's Office to change and explain why the case was closed. In May 2020, a Philadelphia court finally supported their claim. The family hopes to receive the case file, which they were previously denied access to. There is also a CCTV video from the building. It does not show anything unusual, it only confirms the time Samuel left and returned to the apartment. They also asked to see the 911 call recording. These procedures were delayed, and the trial was rescheduled for 2021. If they win, the case will be reclassified and investigated as a murder. However, due to the time that has passed and the investigation's shortcomings, many clues have been lost forever, such as the luminol test. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office closed the case in July 2022. The case has been transferred to the Chester County District Attorney's Office, which has assigned new investigators and a prosecutor to take over. This change was supported by Ellen's parents. They have always maintained that their daughter did not end her life. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Christina and Thompson Harris. Christina and Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, both 40, had been married for 11 years by 2014. They got married in 2003, after dating for about 5 years. In 2009, Christina and Jason welcomed their first child, which brought significant changes to their lives. Despite the daily challenges and responsibilities, they were happy to be parents. Christina took care of the house and the children, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As the children grew up, Christina was able to contribute financially to the family by working. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave because she was expecting their second child in a few weeks. On September 29, 2014, Jason chatted with Christina while at work. Christina was suffering from a cold. She had a bad cough and was not sleeping well, but she reassured her husband that she was fine. A few hours later, Jason called his wife at home but received no response, which worried him. Unable to reach Christina, Jason asked a neighbor to check on her. He explained that Christina was sick and not answering the phone. The neighbor knocked on the front door but got no answer, so she called Christina's name. Receiving no response, she decided to try the door, found it unlocked, and entered the house. When she entered the bedroom, she found Christina lying on the bed and could not wake her. The neighbor called 911 and ran out of the house to call another neighbor, a nurse. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had died. Thus, on September 29, 2014, 4 months after the birth of her second child, Christina was found dead at home. When the police arrived, Jason Harris was present. He told the police and paramedics that his wife had been sick but was alive when he left for work that morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled that Christina died from an overdose of a controlled substance, a finding that shocked her family and friends. Most people who knew Christina, a mother of 2, including a newborn, believed that she had never used drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy, told police that her daughter was fine when she saw her the day before she died. Police were therefore skeptical of Jason Harris's claim that his wife had a cold. According to Kathy, Christina said her marriage to Jason was complicated. Jason was unhappy with the marriage but did not want a divorce because of concerns about child support and custody. Neighbors who discovered Christina's body also provided additional information to the police. Jason reportedly told them that the night before Christina died, he had prepared cereal with milk for her, then Christina passed out and dropped the plate. Police realized that Christina's family and friends had a hard time accepting that she might be involved in drugs. Instead, police suspected that Jason Harris was involved in Christina's death. Christina's mother and sisters insisted that police test her breast milk. According to Kathy, the police ignored the request for 48 hours. However, thanks to the family's persistence, the police finally agreed to investigate. As a result, breast milk was used as evidence for the first time in Michigan history. As confirmed by Christina's family and friends, all drug tests at her workplace and at the hospital where she gave birth to her second child were negative. Her second child was only 4 months old when Christina died. Christina was breastfeeding, and Kathy confirmed that Christina was very careful about what she put into her body because she didn't want to affect her child. Christina often pumped breast milk while at work and stored it in the freezer. Some of the breast milk was left at Kathy's mother's house. They tested 3 bags of breast milk for possible drug residue. These bags were labeled with the date they were put in the freezer so Christina knew which bag to thaw first. Experts tested all the samples, including the ones frozen just before Christina died, and found no signs of drugs. This proves that Christina did not use the substance that killed her. Jason Harris's sister was the only one who suggested that Christina had used drugs, prompting investigators to focus more on Jason and treat Christina's death as a homicide. The investigation was slow, and it is unclear what would have happened if Christina's family had not been actively involved in the search for the truth. Kathy repeatedly reminded Davison police about her daughter's case in August 2016, nearly 2 years after Christina's death. Not seeing the enthusiasm and desire to solve her daughter's case in Davison, Kathy asked Davison police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police, which had new investigators. From there, the story began to unravel. Police gathered a lot of information about Jason Harris, including how he acted before and after his wife's death. Jason had been having affairs with other women. Christina knew about this and confided in her family and co-workers that Jason had been texting other people while she was giving birth to their youngest child. Christina once told a co-worker that if she died, Jason would be the cause. When asked if she was serious, she said yes. Jason told his co-worker that he suspected the second child was not his biological child. He also complained that after the birth, Christina became depressed, often stayed in bed, and did not go to work. Jason often complained about Christina nagging him. A co-worker of Jason recalled that Jason may have told him that he wanted Christina dead. He described the relationship between Jason and Christina as toxic and recalled that they argued frequently. One of the most surprising and shocking things about this case is that Jason Harris did not hesitate to let everyone know that he wanted to get rid of his wife. He tried to do so, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to his words and actions before Christina died. Jason bought poison twice and mixed it into her drink. Both times, Christina felt that the taste was unusual and did not drink it. Jason then asked a co-worker to find him a poison that would not change the taste or smell of drinks or food. Jason said he wanted to knock Christina unconscious so she would not feel anything. When he shared with the co-worker that Christina would not drink water because it tasted strange, the co-worker refused to talk to him further. The co-worker testified that Jason had talked about wanting Christina to stop nagging and that the co-worker thought Jason was joking. Jason also told a co-worker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested for another reason before the murder. Jason therefore offered the co-worker $10,000 from Christina's $100,000 life insurance policy to kill her. The co-worker refused the offer, thinking that Jason was just venting his anger by talking about his wife and making inappropriate jokes. According to the colleague, he recalled a conversation with Jason in which Jason said, "I'm bored with her. I'm going to dump her." The police then decided to question the neighbor who discovered Christina's body. The neighbor testified that she saw Christina's family truck in the driveway. But Christina did not come to the door. She entered the house and found Christina lying in bed, unresponsive. The neighbor asked Jason if she should try to wake her up. He replied that Christina must have fallen asleep and that he would come home. The neighbor went back inside and removed the covers around Christina because she felt cold and had foam coming from her mouth and nose. The neighbor called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The neighbor, who was a registered nurse, testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she believed she was already dead. Jason told the police that he asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to rush home because Christina was unresponsive. However, witnesses said Jason did not appear anxious or in a hurry. What raised suspicions about Jason was that morning, he called Christina's supervisor at work. He told her that Christina had died the night before and that he wanted to inquire about the $100,000 death benefit from Christina's life insurance policy through work. Additionally, one of the women Jason had an intimate relationship with told investigators that Jason had contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from an overdose of a controlled substance. This suggests that he knew what caused Christina's death even before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina saw him in his driveway. She said that Jason told her that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad things about Christina. He said that Christina dropped her bowl of cereal, and he told her to go to bed. Jason also told a neighbor that his wife tossed and turned during the night and that he heard her coughing before he left for work. Jason wondered if that was her last breath. Jason told a police officer that Christina was coughing a lot when he left the house. He also told the police that Christina fell asleep eating cereal the night before she died. Finally, Jason told Christina's mother, Kathy, that before she died, Christina complained that her water tasted like chemicals. One of the main motives in this case is believed to be insurance money. Within a week of Christina's death, Jason and his mother went to Christina's workplace to inquire about the life insurance money. Additionally, Jason received a $20,000 death benefit from a life insurance policy issued by his company shortly after Christina's death. One of Jason's lovers moved in with Jason and his children. Christina's mother believed that Jason's lover moved in with him after Christina's funeral. However, Jason's neighbor testified that the lover had even moved into Jason's home before Christina's funeral. The neighbor added that Jason's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the home within days of Christina's death. Police also discovered that Jason Harris purchased a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman with whom he had exchanged more than 5,800 text messages. County Medical Examiner Dr. Brian Hunter submitted post-mortem blood and urine samples for laboratory testing. Dr. Hunter determined that the test results were consistent with Christina being poisoned by a lethal substance. Initially, Dr. Hunter determined that her death was an accident. Because there were no injection marks on Christina's body and investigators did not find any powder residue or rolling papers next to the bed where Christina died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. In 2019, after Christina's family disputed Christina's cause of death, Dr. Hunter later changed Christina's death certificate from an accident to a homicide. Police charged Jason with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance resulting in death. He was denied bail. Jason's attorney, Nicholas Robinson, said his client pleaded not guilty to the charges and wanted to fight them. When he was arrested, Jason had lost his job after testing positive for drugs. Kathy's efforts to ensure that law enforcement would punish the person responsible for her daughter's death were not overlooked. Gena's County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years ago, he began receiving Facebook messages and emails from a Davidson woman who claimed her daughter had died and that her death was not an accident. "It can't be happening," the woman told the prosecutor. She was certain that someone had caused her daughter's death. Kathy's passionate pleas caught David Layton's attention, prompting authorities to re-examine the death of her daughter, Christina. "I will never forget what she wrote in an email, Prosecutor, you are my last hope. This is our last chance to get justice for my daughter. Please help me," David Layton said. "At that moment and as I spoke to her this morning, I was absolutely convinced that her daughter's death was not an accident. It was the result of foul play. It was Kathy's relentless efforts to seek justice for her daughter's death that led to this situation. And those efforts paid off." The trial began in 2020. The prosecution alleged that Jason put a controlled substance in his wife's cereal bowl to kill her. He then went to work as usual, waited a few hours, and asked a neighbor to check on Christina. According to the prosecution, Jason wanted someone else to discover his wife's body in order to reduce suspicion against him. The direct evidence against Jason was overwhelming. Jason had a motive for killing Christina. He was having an affair with another woman, suspected she was cheating on him, believed the second child was not his, and was tired of her nagging. Jason did not want a divorce because he did not want to pay child support or lose custody of her. Before her death, Jason told a coworker that he wanted Christina dead. On the morning of her death, Jason called her company to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and in that call, he said Christina had died the night before. The jury heard clear evidence that Jason not only wanted Christina dead, but that he had tried to hire someone to kill her. He planned to do this and knew where to buy illegal drugs. In fact, he had purchased them on multiple occasions to give to Christina. At trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christina did not use drugs recreationally. Christina was very careful about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding. Furthermore, tests showed that her frozen breast milk contained no harmful substances. To support the theory that Jason had poisoned Christina's food, the prosecution presented toxicology reports. For example, Dr. Judge argued that Christina's death could have been caused by ingestion of some kind of poison. The prosecution ruled out injection because no traces of injection or needles were found at the scene. Dr. Judge also testified that inhalation was unlikely because no rolled-up dollar bills or snorting paper were found at the scene. The court gave Jason Harris a chance to speak, but he did not apologize or show remorse. Instead, he insisted that he was innocent. The judge said, "The jury did not believe your lies," ultimately exposing him as a selfish and deceitful murderer. On November 17, 2021, the jury found Jason Harris, 47, guilty on all charges. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He has appealed the verdict, however. After the trial, Prosecutor David Layton expressed his condolences to Christina's family and friends, emphasizing that this was a tragic case. Layton went on to say, "While this case has many unique and media-driven details, the most important thing is the family's loss. I hope this verdict helps them find comfort in knowing that justice has been served." Jason requested a new trial on the grounds that his defense attorney did not do a good job. He introduced evidence in the form of his attorney's testimony, showing that his defense attorney failed to seek an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and failed to consult with an independent toxicologist. Jason's defense attorney explained this decision as part of a trial strategy because he had thoroughly questioned Dr. Hunter and was able to show the jury that Dr. Hunter had changed his opinion about the cause of death based on information from a related civil lawsuit. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction. He remains in prison for life without the possibility of parole. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois. She was the daughter of Marcy and Jay Kira, who described her as a bubbly, dedicated, and sweet person. Kira worked at the Mall of America, where she held positions at 2 stores, Wet Seal and, most recently, Delia's. Her co-workers were not only her best friends but also her family. She had a unique ability to see strengths in others that they had not yet seen. Kira had planned a bright and peaceful future. Unfortunately, her dreams came to an abrupt end when Kira mysteriously disappeared. On Thursday, February 21, 2013, Kira had a shift. Her co-workers said she was feeling well and had plans to go out to dinner at a fancy restaurant with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, after work. Kira and Jeffrey met 3 years ago and quickly fell in love. Kira and Jeffrey began a romantic relationship and eventually married, forming a happy and stable couple. Although they sometimes disagreed, they resolved everything in private, without letting anyone know about these disagreements. 2 days later, on Saturday, February 23, when Kira failed to show up for work, her co-workers became concerned because this was unlike her. Kira was always punctual, strict with herself and others, never late, and always kept to a schedule. When Kira could not be reached, her co-workers called Jeffrey, but he did not know where his wife was. Jeffrey said that Kira had left home the morning before and had not returned. He was not too worried because Kira had a habit of occasionally being absent for a day or two, often staying overnight at friends' or relatives' houses without notice. However, the bad weather with heavy snow that day may have worried him. Jeffrey thought that something might have happened to her on the road. Perhaps her car broke down and her cell phone ran out of battery. That same day, not receiving any news from his wife, Jeffrey reported her missing and contacted Kira's family. Her family was shocked by the mysterious disappearance of their loved one, and this was a huge shock for them. After receiving the report of Kira Steger's disappearance, detectives immediately began investigating. Investigators began by questioning Jeffrey and searching the nearby area. Detectives went to Jeffrey's home to talk to him. Jeffrey said that on Thursday, he and Kira wanted to spend time together. They had dinner, talked, went bowling, and then left the mall. According to Jeffrey, they both went home soon after because Kira planned to watch a movie. Jeffrey also told the detectives that his wife had left the house the following morning, Friday, around 8:30. A meeting had been scheduled at work that she had to attend. Kira was acting normally, and Jeffrey did not notice anything unusual. Jeffrey did not find anything unusual about Kira's occasional disappearances, although he did not know where she went or who she was spending time with. Jeffrey said that they had been having relationship problems for the past few months. However, he did not find it serious or alarming, but rather viewed it as the usual small arguments that occur in every family. The detective asked Jeffrey about who Kira might be seeing and whether she was in any other relationship. Jeffrey dismissed this idea, as he had asked Kira directly and she had denied it. According to Jeffrey, he truly loved Kira and trusted her. Investigators turned over all the information they had gathered about Kira and her car to the patrol team. Detectives also went directly to the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's statements and look for clues. The Mall of America, located in Bloomington, is one of the largest malls in the world, with 520 stores, an amusement park, an aquarium, a movie theater, a golf course, and many other amenities. The mall has numerous security cameras, so detectives reviewed the footage of Kira leaving the company on February 21st. The video did not show anything unusual. Jeffrey's initial statement was very credible. He met Kira after work. They stayed in the mall for a while, then went down to the parking lot and left. There was no argument, and the evening went smoothly. Waiting without knowing what had happened was difficult, and each passing day made Kira's family more and more worried about her safety. With no word from her, Kira's family traveled to Bloomington to help with the investigation. They printed flyers with Kira's picture on them, posted them on utility poles, and handed them out to passers-by. Their goal was to attract as much attention as possible to find Kira. They knew they couldn't just stand by and had to take action to find their loved one. While Kira's family was handing out flyers, the investigators continued their investigation. While interviewing neighbors, the police discovered a surveillance camera on a neighbor's home. The camera was pointed at Kira and Jeffrey's home. The investigators asked the homeowner to copy the footage from the camera because they hoped to find clues in it. Meanwhile, records from a cell phone company provided them with a new lead. According to phone records, Kira was in a relationship with someone other than Jeffrey. That person was Ryan Wendt, the manager of the chain of stores where she worked. They had a deep relationship and corresponded frequently. Police determined that Ryan had left the state and that when the search for Kira began, Ryan was driving to Colorado. This man was closely related to the investigation because, in addition to his relationship with Kira, he was out of state at the time of her disappearance. It could be a coincidence, or there could be something else going on behind his departure. Investigators needed answers. After several attempts, detectives were able to contact Ryan. He said the last time he had contact with Kira was when he was driving through South Dakota and texting her. These messages were sent shortly before Kira went missing. After reviewing the timestamps, detectives determined that Kira had contacted her new lover while she was having dinner with her husband. The messages showed that Kira had become increasingly distant from Jeffrey. Investigators ran a cell tower location check on Ryan's phone and checked his credit card statements. The results showed that he was indeed out of state that night and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. As a result, Ryan was released and cleared as a suspect. The timestamps on the messages showed that Kira was still texting Ryan even after she returned home to her husband. However, after 11:44 p.m., their conversation stopped, and Kira's phone was no longer active. Meanwhile, another investigation team was preparing to review video from a surveillance camera installed at Kira's neighbor's home. The camera captured most of the street scene from left to right. However, it rotated so quickly that it was difficult to observe. If the camera saw something suspicious, it immediately moved in another direction. Jeffrey and Kira's house was only visible for a few seconds when the camera panned to the right. Jeffrey said that after dinner and bowling, he and Kira went home, watched a movie, and went to bed. However, when investigators reviewed the footage, they discovered that just after 2 a.m., Kira's car backed into the driveway. Because the footage was poor and the camera kept moving, it was difficult to determine exactly what was happening at that time. The car then left the house. Jeffrey explained that Kira had asked him to fill up her car with gas for work the next day, so he went to the gas station. Surprisingly, this story was true. He was seen at the gas station around 3:30 a.m. However, detectives discovered that after leaving the gas station, he headed toward the highway instead of home. It is unclear where Jeffrey went next. The neighbor's camera did not record him returning, but this may have been a coincidence since the camera was always moving. Therefore, in theory, Jeffrey could have gotten home later since the camera was capturing a different angle. When investigators reviewed the video, they saw Kira's Chevrolet leave at 9:21 a.m. Unfortunately, they couldn't determine who was driving. A missing person report was filed on Saturday, February 23rd, and on Monday, February 25th, police received a call about a suspicious car parked near the shopping center where Kira worked. There are 2 multi-story parking lots there. A security guard found the car parked for several days and asked for it to be towed. When the driver inspected the car before towing it, he noticed suspicious red stains on the trunk lid and immediately called the police. That car turned out to be Kira's white car. Although there wasn't much blood, just a few small stains, it was still very concerning. In the car, they found Kira's wallet and a divorce form downloaded from the internet. Additionally, a dark object in the snow behind the car caught the attention of the investigators. As they approached, they found a rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains. DNA testing confirmed that it was Kira Steger's blood. The investigators were devastated to realize that Kira was most likely dead. This heartbreaking news was a huge shock to her family and friends. Their last hope of seeing Kira again was dashed, leaving them with questions. How did she die? Was she in pain? Who could hate her enough to take her life? The fact that Kira's body had not been found added to the confusion, as the endless grief seemed unlikely to be alleviated. The detectives made it a top priority to find out who had left the car in the parking lot. The car left the house at 9:21 a.m., and about 20 minutes later, it was caught on a mall camera. There were no cameras in the parking lot where the car was found, but another camera recorded the road leading to the lot, which was located near where Kira's car was parked. After reviewing the camera footage, detectives found that a hooded man appeared a few minutes after Kira's white Chevrolet pulled into the lot. It was cold enough that it was not unusual for him to be wearing a hoodie, but detectives wanted to learn more about where he went. The hooded man was seen walking across the street and approaching a taxi stand. He briefly chatted with a driver, then got into a cab and drove away. Police were able to determine the company that owned the taxis in the mall parking lot. Based on the time he spent talking to the drivers, police were able to determine the license plate numbers. All of the taxis had GPS tracking devices, which showed that the man ended up about a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house and left after paying in cash. As the taxi left the neighborhood, it was caught on camera, the same camera that had filmed part of Kira and Jeffrey's house. 2 minutes later, a man in a hoodie entered the frame. The low resolution of the video made it difficult to identify his face, but the white logo on his shirt was clearly visible. As investigators continued to examine the video, they saw the man enter Kira and Jeffrey's house. Kira was missing, leading to suspicions that the hooded man might be Jeffrey. After obtaining a search warrant, the police went to the house. At first, the house looked normal and unremarkable. However, upon closer inspection, forensic experts discovered dark red stains in Kira and Jeffrey's bedroom. There were several on the wall near the bed and about 100 on the mattress. It was clear that the bedroom had been rearranged and cleaned recently. When the forensic team sprayed luminol, the carpeting glowed. There were bloodstains throughout the house that were not visible to the naked eye. The bloodstains originated in the bedroom and extended to other areas of the house. Forensic testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kira, leading investigators to believe that she was no longer alive. In addition to searching the house, police also searched Jeffrey's car. There were no bloodstains or signs of a struggle. However, they found one interesting detail: a gas station receipt in Jeffrey's car, dated 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned in the mall parking lot. According to the receipt, the transaction was made using Jeffrey's card. Detectives went to the gas station to review the security cameras. The camera recorded Jeffrey filling up with gas, then going inside to withdraw money from an ATM. The video clearly showed Jeffrey's face and a logo on his jacket that looked similar to the logo on the man in the earlier footage. With video evidence and all the evidence in the house, Jeffrey Trevino, 39, was arrested. He was taken to the police station for questioning and is now the prime suspect. Immediately after being released from the interrogation room, Jeffrey contacted a lawyer and was advised to exercise his right to remain silent. The police had enough evidence to charge him, but the most compelling evidence was Kira's body. No one suspected Kira was dead at the time. Police, Kira's family, and volunteers searched for her for months. In late March, as the snow melted, a volunteer found a strange bag on the edge of Keller Lake a few miles from Jeffrey's house and called the police. The bag contained a bloody pillow, a shirt, and a bra. The forensic team linked these items to Kira because her DNA was found on them. The lake remained frozen, hampering the search. However, when divers surveyed the water, they found no remains. The area around the lake was searched several times with 4 cadaver dogs, trained to find dead bodies, but to no avail. 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, on May 8, 2013, the St. Paul Police Department received a disturbing call. The caller reported that he had seen what appeared to be a body in the Mississippi River. Police discovered and recovered a body. The body was naked. Dental records identified it as Kira Steger. She had suffered severe trauma to the forehead and a broken left index finger. Because the body was so badly decomposed, the medical examiner was unable to determine the exact cause of death. Using new evidence, investigators attempted to reconstruct a timeline of the events leading up to Kira's death and the events that followed. They believed that when Kira and Jeffrey returned home, Jeffrey found her texting with someone else. When Kira refused to show her husband the messages, he snatched the phone from her and broke her fingers. After reading the romantic messages, Jeffrey became even angrier, and in a fit of rage, he killed Kira and tried to cover up the crime. He drove Kira's car to the house, put the body in the trunk, then went to the gas station before taking the body to the riverbank and dumping it. He then returned home, discarding the bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes along the way. The next morning, he went to the gas station to withdraw cash from an ATM, knowing that after leaving Kira's car in the shopping center car park, he would need cash to pay for a taxi. After leaving Kira's car, Jeffrey went home and spent the day cleaning. He tried to make it look like Kira had driven away that morning and that nothing had happened. However, this plan was foiled by surveillance cameras. In October 2013, a jury convicted Jeffrey Trevino, 39. They accepted that his actions were not intentional and that they were the result of a heated after discovering that his wife was having an affair. Before the judge handed down his sentence, Kira's family spoke out. "This monster was a calculating criminal," said Carrie Ann Steger, Kira's sister. "He deserves no mercy." Kira's mother, Marcy, said Jeffrey showed no sympathy for her daughter. "He dumped my daughter like a piece of trash into the most polluted water in the country," she said. But her father, Jay, said, "No punishment can ever make up for the pain Jeffrey has caused our family. No amount of time for Jeffrey is enough, never enough," he said. In November 2013, Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959, in Houston, Texas. Kathy grew up in a peaceful and happy family. During her childhood, she was very close to her older sister. When she was a teenager, Kathy met Mike Odom, whom she would later marry and start a family. After the wedding, the two settled in a quiet suburb outside of Houston, and soon after, they had a daughter and a son. After the birth of their second child, Kathy stayed home and took care of the children. Meanwhile, Mike worked at her father's small sign factory. Thanks to the financial support of Kathy's parents, the family was able to provide for their children. Therefore, Kathy was able to take care of the children without having to worry about working extra. On March 3, 1987, Kathy stayed home to take care of the children as usual. Mike went to work and then met up with friends at a bar after work. He called Kathy from a pay phone, but she didn't answer. This worried Mike because Kathy rarely left the house. He called several times but got no response. Worried about his wife, Mike called their neighbor, Tim Robinson, and asked him to check on her. Tim went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. He looked through the living room window and saw that the television was still on. So he knocked again but got no response. At this point, he began to worry that something serious might have happened to Kathy. Instead of going home to call Mike or the police, he decided to drive around town looking for police patrols. After a few minutes of searching, he spotted a police car and explained the situation. He asked them to check on Kathy to see if she was okay. When the police arrived at the house, they also got no response to their knocking. They decided to try the door and found it unlocked. Once inside, the police found Kathy's older daughter lying unconscious on the sofa, clearly traumatized but still alive. The police quickly called an ambulance and continued to check other rooms in the house. In the bedroom, they found the younger child lying in her crib, safe and sound. But when they entered another room, they discovered a horrific scene. Kathy was lying on the floor, covered in blood and naked. The police immediately determined that she was dead. Her arms were also tied with a light cord. Paramedics took Kathy's daughter to the hospital and began investigating the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived at the house, but the police did not reveal any specific details. Instead, They asked him to go to the hospital to care for his granddaughter when she woke up. While waiting at the hospital, he learned of his daughter's death from a news report on TV. When Mike arrived at the house, the police quickly discovered something strange. He arrived late and had blood-like stains on his shirt. The police asked him to hand over his clothes and answer questions. During this time, the police discovered some interesting signs. They found several blood stains in the bathroom, indicating that the attacker had tried to hide the evidence after the crime. This suggested that the attacker had been in the house for some time to clean up. Forensic experts also discovered some important clues. There were no signs of forced entry, and all the windows and doors except the front door were locked. This suggested that Kathy had invited the attacker into the house or that the attacker had a key. Police speculated that the attacker may have threatened to harm Kathy's children if she screamed or resisted. Therefore, Kathy may have complied with the attacker's demands, hoping to be spared, but was ultimately murdered. As doctors worked to save Kathy's daughter, they discovered that she had been brutally beaten, most likely with her bare hands. She spent several hours in critical condition at the hospital, and her chances of survival were still very low. After examining Kathy's body, medical experts determined that she had suffered severe injuries with 16 stab wounds, most of which were concentrated in the abdomen. They also discovered that she had been sexually assaulted and collected biological samples of the offender from the scene. However, at that time, DNA analysis methods were not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, experts were unable to extract DNA profiles from biological samples. They were only able to determine the killer's blood type, so the sample was sent to the lab for further analysis. The police had noticed suspicious stains on his shirt early in the investigation and had kept the clothes for examination. His behavior that evening was very suspicious. He had gone out with friends after work, but instead of going home when he couldn't reach his wife, he asked a neighbor to check on him. The police had seen similar cases before, where a husband killed his wife and created an alibi by going out with friends. He would then ask someone else to check on his wife to avoid being the first to discover the body and throwing the police off the trail. The police expanded their investigation to see if Mike might have planned the murder before meeting his friends. They also discovered that Mike had a criminal record. After graduating from high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover police officer. Mike was sentenced to 6 years in prison but only served 2 years before being paroled. He later married Kathy. Although Mike had a criminal record, the police needed more evidence to charge him. The police also began investigating Mike's neighbor, Tim, because of signs of suspicion. Tim drove around town looking for patrol officers instead of calling the police. The police checked Tim's car and found suspicious blood-like stains on the carpet. They sent these samples to the lab for analysis. Now investigators wondered if Mike and Tim might have worked together to commit the crime. After completing the report, the medical examiner came to an important conclusion. Kathy's time of death was around 1 p.m., before she was discovered around 6 p.m. The police expanded their investigation to determine the suspect's whereabouts around that time and to find out what they did after the murder. Mike and Tim both claimed to be at work at the time. So the police set out to see if their statements were accurate. 2 days after the murder, they received a call from the hospital saying Kathy's daughter had woken up. The police went to see her in the hope that she would provide important information about what had happened. However, they encountered a major obstacle. The 4-year-old girl's memory was almost completely erased. She only remembered a light-haired man entering the house, while Mike and Tim had dark hair. But the police did not rule them out as suspects. They believed that the severe trauma could have made her memory inaccurate. The police received a call from the lab with surprising information. Experts examined the evidence and found that the stain on Tim's car carpet was motor oil, and the stain on Mike's shirt was just paint, not evidence of a crime. In addition, many of Mike and Tim's co-workers also confirmed that they had been at work all day and did not leave until the evening. Thus, they had no opportunity to go to Kathy's house and commit the crime. The police requested a lie detector test and the results showed that neither of them were lying. There was no conclusive evidence. The police had to review the entire case and investigate other suspects who might be familiar to Kathy's family, because the attacker could have easily entered Kathy's house. During the investigation, they had conversations with Kathy's relatives and friends to find out who they thought might have committed the crime. Many of them immediately named the same person, Greg. Greg was Kathy's brother-in-law, and her loved ones revealed that she often complained about his behavior. Specifically, according to Kathy, Greg openly flirted with her and repeatedly tried to convince her to have sex with him. Kathy also said that Greg often made inappropriate comments about her appearance, especially about her abdomen. And according to the evidence collected, we know that most of the injuries were on Kathy's abdomen. The police also knew that Greg had a history of illegal drug use and a criminal record. Therefore, the police began to suspect him and soon found some important clues. They found Greg's fingerprints matched one in Kathy's house, as well as a hair that matched his. However, it should be noted that Greg often visited Kathy's family, so it is possible that the fingerprints and hair were in the house before the murder occurred. Kathy's parents also believed that he was the one who killed their daughter. Kathy's mother specifically remembered one time when Greg visited Kathy's daughter at the hospital. When she saw Greg, she had a clear look of fear on her face. These observations suggested that she was afraid of him. However, when asked, she could not remember what happened on the day of the murder. After hearing all this information, the police summoned Greg for questioning. However, he denied any involvement in the murder and said that he was with a friend at the time. During the questioning, Greg asked to go to the parking lot because he was afraid of being fined for expired parking. However, he did not return to the police station. Greg's wife, Kathy's sister, said that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m. This meant that Greg had a 4-hour window around the time of the murder, enough time for him to commit the crime. However, the police still did not find enough evidence to prove Greg's involvement in the murder. In a last-ditch effort to find more clues, the police decided to analyze a semen sample taken from Kathy's body. However, at that time, the technology only allowed for the blood type of the owner of the semen sample to be determined. In addition, the analysis of the samples collected from the case was too small to be tested. However, the police still decided to perform the test. The results showed that the blood type of the owner of the semen sample matched Greg's blood type, but this was not enough to conclude that he was guilty. As a result, the police were unable to arrest him. They continued to search for more evidence, but were unable to prove that Greg was involved in the case. Kathy's family believed that Greg was the killer. Kathy's sister Shelley still did not believe that her husband was involved in the case and continued to live with him. In the years that followed, the police continued to revisit the case, hoping to find any new clues. In 1998, 11 years after Kathy was murdered, they requested a DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, experts were only able to extract a partial DNA profile, which, when compared to Greg's DNA, showed that Greg was among the 2% of the population who could match the profile. He could not be arrested based on this result. The police again called Greg in for questioning, telling him that the semen from Kathy's body matched his DNA. Greg then changed his original statement, saying that Kathy had been romantically involved with him and that he had actually visited her on the day of the murder, but Greg insisted that she was still alive when he left. The police were suspicious of Greg's sudden change in story because suspects often change their stories when they hear about DNA evidence. In addition, Kathy had complained about Greg's flirtations, feeling uncomfortable around him. So it was unlikely that she would have had a secret relationship with him. But the police knew that they could not convict without a perfect DNA match. The local police reviewed the case and confirmed that a guilty verdict was almost impossible, and the case was put on hold again for many years. In 2002, the police reopened the case and asked for help from forensic scientist Catherine Long. At the time, Catherine was doing groundbreaking DNA research. She and her colleagues wanted to know if the offender's DNA might still be on Kathy's body after the strangulation, and if they could extract that DNA for analysis. To test this, Catherine and her team conducted a simulation experiment. They followed the steps the perpetrators took by briefly strangling each other, then taking samples from their hands and necks for analysis. The results showed that even in such a short interaction, there were still enough skin cells to extract and analyze DNA. The police began to focus on the available evidence when they were unable to re-examine her body. They decided to thoroughly examine all the items related to the case to see if the perpetrator had come into contact with them. They quickly noticed the string of lights that the killer had used to tie Kathy's hands, which the police gave to Catherine and her colleagues to examine. As they began their work, they noticed that the string had been stored in a paper bag. This was important because the paper bag allowed air to circulate, preventing moisture buildup and protecting the biological samples. Experts used cotton swabs to collect biological samples from the entire length of the rope. They paid special attention to areas on the rope that still had traces of Kathy's blood. After analysis, they discovered 2 DNA profiles. The first profile, belonging to the victim Kathy, the second profile completely matched Greg's DNA sample. The police finally had evidence that Greg was the one who tied Kathy's hands, and that he was the killer. 15 years after Kathy's death, the perpetrator was finally arrested. During questioning, Greg did not confess, insisting that he had a romantic relationship with Kathy. The police did not believe him. While awaiting trial, Greg was detained. A cellmate of Greg's contacted the police and said that Greg had confessed to him. According to the friend, Greg told them the details of the attack and murder. Greg said that one day, he had been using illegal drugs and went to Kathy's house. Once inside, Greg tried to force Kathy to have sex, but she refused and asked him to leave. However, Greg became aggressive and attacked Kathy's daughter, causing many serious injuries. Greg assured Kathy that if she did not comply with his wishes, he would kill her. Kathy had no choice but to agree to protect her children. Greg then tied her up, attacked her, and killed her with many injuries. To cover up the crime, Greg washed the blood off himself in the bathroom and changed into Kathy's husband's clothes before leaving the school. The police forced Greg to face the truth. This time, Greg confessed to killing Kathy. In 2004, he pleaded guilty in court and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. However, he only served 4 years before dying at the age of 56 of liver cancer. Kathy's husband, Mike, died at the age of 45. For 15 years, Kathy's family, including her parents and children, waited patiently, trusting that the police would find the killer. Although they believed Greg was the killer, they saw him continue to live with their second daughter, but there was nothing they could do. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Information about her family and childhood is limited. She grew up in the Cuban with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. From a young age, Samadi attended a local school and showed a complex personality. Samadi stood out for her beauty and knew how to take advantage of her appearance. However, due to her ambition and vanity, she put material and personal interests first, disappointing many people. She was also very jealous and aggressive when she was young. Thanks to her doll-like appearance, Samadi Fonseca worked for many years as a Barbie in a large bookstore of the Universal Company. The nickname Barbie stuck with her ever since. After graduating from high school, Samadi began a relationship with Osvaldo Fernando Belier, a successful journalist working for a local television station. Osvaldo was 16 years older than Samadi. This was Samadi's longest and most serious relationship, but Osvaldo never proposed to her. In 1996, they had a son, Christopher, and a year later, a daughter, Christina, was born. Due to scandals and jealousy, Samadi and Osvaldo divorced in 2012. In 2013, Osvaldo died at the age of 53 without leaving a will for Samadi. Not accepting this, Samadi decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to Osvaldo's old house, occupied it, and changed the locks to prevent his family and heirs from entering. In addition to seizing the property, Samadi also took some of Osvaldo's valuables. Osvaldo's family was extremely angry and immediately sued Samadi for theft. The police forced Samadi to leave the house, but no criminal proceedings were initiated against her. Samadi had several relationships, most notably with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a third daughter, Maria. Some sources claim that they were married but divorced after a few years. However, other sources claim that Samadi was not married, but simply gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his consent. Many strange events have been discovered. Some Barbie lovers have gone missing or died under mysterious circumstances. However, this has not been noticed for a long time. For example, one of Samadi's lovers went missing after breaking up with her. To this day, this person has not been found. Many suspect Samadi's involvement, but there is no concrete evidence. Another case is Diaco, also Samadi's former lover. He was murdered after breaking up with her. The case looked like a failed robbery. The perpetrator was never caught. Again, people suspected Samadi was involved, but there was no clear evidence. The most famous victim believed to be linked to Samadi was Gerardo Cruz. Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native, was born in December 1992 in San Jose. He did not know his biological father because he left the family before he was born. Gerardo's mother, Ana Patricia, later married a man named Hermes Rodriguez. Hermes adopted Gerardo and loved him as his own son. A few years later, Gerardo had a younger sister named Milena. His childhood and youth were quite peaceful. He attended a normal school, loved motorbikes, and soon found true love with a girl named Carol. At the age of 23, Gerardo, his wife and 4-year-old daughter Genesis Cruz moved to live with his aunt and uncle in the suburbs of San Sebastian. He worked at a local bakery to support his family. Gerardo and Carol was happy and were expecting a second child. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a regular customer at the bakery. Samadi was 40 years old but still attractive, liked to dress provocatively and flirt with men. Notably, she started having affairs with much younger men, probably because she enjoyed the attention they received. Despite the age difference of nearly 20 years, Gerardo quickly became infatuated with this beautiful woman and began dating her secretly. She often came to the bakery, almost every day, to meet her young lover, attracting the attention of other employees. Samadi was often accompanied by his eldest daughter Christina, who was 19 at the time. Initially, Gerardo skillfully balanced his family life with his secret meetings with his mistress. Both women were unaware of each other's existence. However, Gerardo gradually became careless and began telling his friends and colleagues about Samadi, praising her as a great mistress and giving him gifts. Rumors of Gerardo's relationship soon reached his mother, who tried to convince her son to leave his mistress. However, Gerardo and Samadi's relationship only lasted a few months and ended in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that Gerardo had a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Samadi was furious and began calling and texting Gerardo's wife, Carol, insulting her and threatening to kill Gerardo if he did not stay with her. Gerardo begged his wife for forgiveness and wanted to keep the family together. He did not take Samadi's threats seriously, thinking that she would quickly cool down and find a new boyfriend. He did not expect how vengeful Samadi would become. Just a few days after the breakup with Samadi, while walking on a downtown street, Gerardo discovered an older man secretly filming up a young woman's skirt. Gerardo was angry and decided to record the incident with his phone. He then approached the woman, explained the situation and advised her to call the police. Next, he chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to capture his face. Finally, the man fled in a taxi. That evening, Gerardo posted a video of the incident on his personal website. After just one night, the video went viral online. Netizens quickly identified the elderly man in the video as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former finance ministry official. The video quickly spread across media, turning Gerardo into a national celebrity. He was repeatedly invited to interviews in newspapers, on television and on radio to recount the incident, condemn the former official's actions and affirm that he had no regrets about what he had done. Meanwhile, a team of talented lawyers hired by Luis began to legally attack Gerardo. They accused him of violating the law by distributing the video and were preparing to sue him. Gerardo was surprised and confused by the situation, not knowing why he was being tried instead of the man who had committed a depraved act with an innocent girl. On October 7th, Gerardo gave his final interview on a local radio station. He was confident in his views and did not feel nervous. The next day, Gerardo planned to meet his friend Oswald after work, but canceled, citing an emergency. It was later revealed that Gerardo had received a text message from Samadi that day. In the message, she had lured him to the park that evening with the promise of another interview. Gerardo trusted his ex-girlfriend completely and did not suspect anything. After work, he went to the meeting place, but instead of meeting the journalist, he was attacked by 2 strange men. They robbed him of his bag, beat him and stabbed him several times in the chest and stomach before running away. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo called his friend to tell him the news. The friend immediately called the police and an ambulance. Thanks to timely treatment, Gerardo was taken to the hospital. Doctors tried to save his life for 42 days. During this time, Gerardo underwent many surgeries, but ultimately did not survive. On November 19th, Gerardo passed away in the intensive care unit. Since Gerardo had just become famous before the tragedy, the news of his condition attracted national attention and was not exaggerated. Gerardo's family gave interviews, asking people to pray for his recovery. They did not understand why someone would attack Gerardo. Many people attended the funeral to express their condolences to the family. People hoped that the police would soon catch the culprit and give him a fair trial. There were initially many theories about the case. One theory was that it was a robbery murder, because Gerardo was attacked in the park in the evening, his bag was stolen and he was stabbed with a knife. However, a few days before, Gerardo released a shocking video involving a famous former official, which could be related to the case. Therefore, the second theory was that it was a revenge murder. The media reported that Luis Solmano Delgado may have hired a hitman to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The case caused a heated debate in the press and people protested to demand the arrest of the culprit. The police began to investigate various theories and look for Gerardo's enemies. The investigation went dormant for months until May 2016, when a security camera video was discovered. The video showed 2 men running away from the crime scene. They immediately became prime suspects, but the police needed to identify and arrest them. The video became crucial evidence and, when released, helped move the investigation forward. The video was repeatedly shown on the news, urging viewers to look out for dangerous suspects. Police sketched the suspects and their physical features. Not long after, one suspect turned himself in and cooperated with the investigation, hoping for a reduced sentence. Thanks to his information, the investigation quickly identified other accomplices and the masterminds. All those involved were arrested, including Samadi and his daughter Cristina, the masterminds, Ronald Arce Barrientos, the taxi driver, Cesar Chavez Cerdas, who acted as an intermediary, Omar Costa, the young miner who directly participated in the attack and followed the victim. The roles and connections of the participants in the case were determined through phone calls and text messages. Samadi was the mastermind, who planned the entire incident in detail and recruited his daughter Cristina to participate. They asked their friends Ronald and Cesar to find an assassin to kill Gerardo, disguising it as a robbery in the park at night. Omar also participated with the task of ensuring that the victim arrived at the right location. Samadi chose October 7th as the date of the murder. On that day, she contacted all the participants several times, assigning roles and ensuring that everyone followed the plan. The young woman also asked them to bring her some of her ex-lover's belongings as evidence after the crime. Gerardo, after finishing his shift, went straight to the park. He thought he was going to an interview, so he tried to arrive on time. However, at the meeting place, he was attacked and stabbed multiple times. The attacker took Gerardo's handbag and jacket, then gave these to the Samadi as evidence. The most important evidence against Samadi were text messages detailing the murder plan and the roles of each participant. She was so confident that she did not delete these messages. The motive for this serious crime was jealousy. She did not want to share her lover with his wife and decided that if she could not have him, no one could. She carefully planned and executed the criminal conspiracy with the help of her daughter. They were immediately arrested and denied bail due to concerns that they might flee the country. The other co-defendants were also detained before trial, except for Omar, the supervisor, and the youngest participant was handed over to the Juvenile Justice Department. The investigation lasted about a year and a half. It was not until December 2017 that the trial of all those involved in the criminal conspiracy began. Samadi has a criminal record and was once arrested for falsifying documents to receive state benefits, but was only fined. She assigned the surname of a former lover to the child without his consent. She then used the court to receive child support from this man for more than 3 years, until the fraud was discovered. Samadi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and fined a large sum. However, because she has a young child, her sentence was reduced to 5 years of suspended imprisonment. At the trial, the victim Gerardo's wife confirmed that she knew about her husband's relationship with Samadi. She also said that Samadi had threatened to kill Gerardo, but he was not too worried about these threats. The main motive for the case was Samadi's jealousy and hurt, as she could not accept that her young lover wanted to stay with his wife. Through phone records, police discovered that Samadi and her daughter Cristina had planned the crime together. After the security camera footage of the murders was released, Cristina had a mental breakdown. She called her mother in tears and wanted to turn herself in, but Samadi reassured her that the investigation would never lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. The court sentenced Samadi to 30 years in prison, Cristina to 25 years, Ronald to 25 years, and Cesar to 25 years. Of the killers, one was sent to a juvenile detention center, while another was still at large at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family received $140,000 in moral compensation. After the trial, they expressed their gratitude to the court for giving Gerardo's killers a fair sentence. Samadi and Cristina's lawyers appealed to the Court of Appeals for a reduced sentence. The appeal hearing took place in November 2019. At the same time, Ronald. According to the testimony, Ronald participated in the massacre but did not know the details of the plan. Ronald and Cesar also appealed in hopes of having their sentences reduced. As a result, each participant in the crime had their sentence reduced by 5 years. Samadi is currently serving a 25-year sentence in a women's prison in Costa Rica. In the summer of 2020, she registered her marriage to a woman named Lindsay Diaz Lopez, whom she met in prison. At the time of the registration, Lindsay had been pardoned and released from prison, while Samadi still had to continue serving nearly 2 more decades of her sentence. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach was born in Sao Paulo in May 1987. She grew up in a wealthy family and is the eldest of 2 children. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, is a successful and respected lawyer in the city. Her boyfriend Felipe Café, who comes from the same city, was born in July 1984. However, he was raised in a large family with quite difficult economic conditions. Since childhood, he had to work part-time to support himself and help his family. When the two met while still in school, they gradually developed a friendship and then became the first love of their youth. They had to hide their relationship in every possible way. It is worth noting that Liana's parents were religious and raised their daughter strictly. Liana was educated in religious values and participated in religious activities since she was a child, and her parents did not support romantic relationships when she was young. In addition, social inequality also played an important role. Liana came from a wealthy family, but she chose a man from a poor family. The prohibition of her parents did not make the young people give up on each other, but on the contrary, they decided to hide their relationship and secretly date in private places to avoid detection. In the fall of 2003, Liana and Felipe planned a trip to a remote and deserted land. Before starting the trip, they prepared carefully so as not to be discovered by their families. Felipe informed his parents that he was going camping with his friends, while Liana said that she was going to visit a church with her friends. She thought that this reason was convincing enough for her parents to believe her and agree to let her go without further questions. Liana and Felipe's family believed the story the children had created, so Liana and Felipe could enjoy life without worrying about their families finding out. The two were happy to be able to spend a week together. Liana and Felipe decided to go to Uji Guasu province, which had beautiful scenery. They brought with them essentials such as tents, sleeping bags, personal belongings, and some food supplies. However, financial problems caused difficulties for the young couple. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they made detailed plans to get to their destination by bus. On the early morning of October 31st, Liana and Felipe met at the designated location. They kept the meeting a secret for fear of being discovered. First, they took the first bus, then arrived at another city in the evening. Here, they stayed overnight at the bus station. Then, they continued traveling by 2 more buses to reach their desired destination. They then walked a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the forest, where they planned to make a fire and enjoy some private time together. The weather was warm, with a little sunshine, and although a little tired from the long journey, Liana and Felipe were still happy, joking and planning their vacation. As the couple walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay, they caught the eye of a group of locals near a pond. They were Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, nicknamed Pernambuco, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino. Chino, 16 years old but already the leader of the gang, thought that there was something valuable in the couple's backpack. The robbers stealthily followed the couple and hid deep in the bushes. While Liana and Felipe set up their tent and had a snack, they were unaware that they were being followed. The robbers waited until they were sure that there were only 2 young men and that they were not carrying weapons. Then Pernambuco and Chino attacked Liana and Felipe. The robbers searched all the bags and backpacks, but found nothing of value. The robbers then decided that they could demand ransom from the couple's relatives. Liana, too scared, immediately said that she came from a wealthy family and that her father would give them as much money as they wanted. The robbers were delighted to hear this information. While the plan to extort money was being finalized, the robbers thought about how much money they could extort. To prevent the couple from escaping, the robbers took them to an abandoned house near the farm, but the house had no windows or doors. They then decided to take the couple to the house of a gang member. When the robbers could not find the way to collect the ransom, they tied up and brutally beat Felipe so that he could not escape or resist. Then all the gang members took turns raping Liana. After torturing the two for a while, the next morning, the robbers took the couple to a secluded place in the forest. The robbers led Felipe, who was seriously injured, deep into the forest. Then, there was a gunshot from deep in the forest. Liana realized what had happened and that her lover was no longer alive. The robbers told her that they had released Felipe and that the robbers wanted to keep her, treating her like a toy until they got bored of her. After their daughter left, Liana's parents soon discovered that she had not gone on a church outing with her friends as she had said. Her parents were also unable to contact her friends to find out where she had gone. Liana's family suspected that their daughter might have run away with her boyfriend and decided to contact his parents. And Felipe's family said that their son had gone camping with his friends. So they had no idea where the couple was. The situation became even more complicated because for several days, no one in the family had been able to contact the couple, and their phones had been turned off. Liana's family reported the incident to the police, who then gradually learned about the couple's route after they left home. Through investigation, the police found the last location where the couple left the bus and moved to a deserted dense forest where their phone was last disconnected in Mbukwashu. A large-scale search began with the participation of the police, rescue workers, and people who knew about the incident who decided to help. A large local businessman also joined the search, using his personal helicopter to search from the air and drop leaflets with pictures of Liana and Felipe. After a short time, the couple's camp was found. However, the atmosphere was very tense because they seemed to have been attacked. There were no signs of blood or fighting, but the couple's personal belongings were thrown around. Their tent had been slashed with a knife from top to bottom. While searching the scene, the rescuers found Felipe's mobile phone. But the most terrifying thing was that they soon discovered Felipe's body. The tied-up man had been shot in the back of the head, at close range. It was clear that the chances of finding Liana alive were slim, but the rescue team and everyone continued to search, hoping that Liana was still alive. Liana's father contacted the press to let everyone know about the incident. A large reward had been announced for any information on Liana's whereabouts, but still no leads. After shooting Felipe dead, the robbers took Liana back to the house where they had previously held them both. Here, the robbers, who had been invited by their accomplices Pernambuco and Chino, joined them. Chino declared that Liana belonged to him, and he could do whatever he wanted with her. He invited everyone to do whatever they wanted with Liana, and his invitation was accepted immediately. The next day, when they learned of the large-scale search operation, the criminals decided to move to another location to cover their tracks. They moved Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, a member of the gang. That night, the robbers went fishing and Liana went with them. Chino put his coat on Liana because it was cold and he wanted to show her that he cared. To his surprise, Chino's brother also arrived. Chino told his brother that Liana was his lover, and his brother immediately realized that Liana was the one the police were looking for. Chino's brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were looking for Liana. Chino decided that he had to get rid of Liana. He lied to Liana, telling her that she was free and that he would lead her out into the street. But in reality, Chino led Liana into the woods. There, he brutally murdered Liana with a knife and then smashed her head with a rock to make sure she was dead. Liana's body was found 5 days after the massacre. Liana was wearing the killer's jacket, which later became one of the key pieces of evidence. The robbers managed to flee without destroying the physical evidence. This naive confidence of the robbers helped the police quickly identify them and arrest all the members of the criminal gang. Chino left his jacket on the victim's body, which had traces of his sweat on it. In addition, he took the murder weapon home. He tried to wash the clothes with traces of Liana's blood so that he could continue to wear them. According to the results of DNA analysis, the police identified the members of the gang who tortured Liana. Chino not only did not deny it, but immediately testified, boasting that he had kidnapped, abused, and then killed the unfortunate victim. Chino describes in detail everything that happened to Liana in her final days. After a lengthy trial, most of the adult members of the gang received quite harsh sentences. Pernambuco was sentenced to life in prison for Felipe's murder. Antonio Geno da Silva, as well as Agnaldo Paes, also received life sentences. But Anthony Matias de Barros was sentenced to only 6 years in prison because he himself did not torture Liana but only provided the gang with his house, where everything took place. However, the gang leader, Chino, was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. For this reason, Chino was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a fairly lenient regime. Chino made several escapes, behaved aggressively and was unpredictable, so he was assigned to undergo psychological testing. Chino was found to have some mental abnormalities, which had terrible consequences, turning him into a sadist and murderer without any feelings of pity or remorse. After being diagnosed as such, Chino was transferred to a medical facility where he underwent mandatory treatment and rehabilitation. No punishment was imposed on him. Chino has a better life than before his crime. He now has his own room with a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He is fed 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, which is part of the policy of the medical facility where he is detained. Chino's monthly living expenses are estimated at $1,200, which is about $2,500. In recent years, Chino has regularly applied for release, noting that he has undergone all of his treatment and no longer poses any threat to others, which means he can return to his normal life. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, the second child of Samantha Ingram, who aspired to be a model and dancer. Growing up, Kelsey had an older brother named Colin. After her birth, her family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, a small industrial town where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. However, her family life was turned upside down when her parents divorced after a few years. After the divorce, her father returned to Virginia. Kelsey grew up into a beautiful young woman with a perfect figure and attractive features that could easily lead to a modeling career. However, she found school unappealing and enjoyed socializing with friends, dating, and attending various social events. Her ultimate ambition was to become famous, appearing on magazine covers, giving interviews, and walking the red carpet at major events. Despite her ambition, Kelsey had no real talent and had to rely on her youth and looks to survive. While in high school, she began attending modeling auditions in hopes of starting a career. Her mother, Samantha, who dreamed of becoming a model, was happy to support her daughter in pursuing her dream. Unfortunately, Kelsey's modeling career was limited to a few small photo shoots for clothing catalogs. Kelsey married Jerry Turner at the age of 18, when she was already pregnant. Their daughter, Beverly, was born shortly after the wedding. However, the marriage did not last long and ended in divorce. By the age of 20, after giving up her modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey saw this as the beginning of a great career and a ticket to the life she had always dreamed of. Kelsey has received several modeling offers and opportunities over the years, including photo shoots for popular publications such as Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo shoot with 110 magazine. She frequently travels to major cities such as Los Angeles and Las Vegas to pursue these opportunities. In an interview, Kelsey describes herself as a curvaceous blonde with a slim waist and reflects her carefree personality, saying that she likes to have fun, party with her friends, and live life to the fullest. Kelsey is not overly concerned about the future. She frequently changes partners and quickly spends any money she earns or receives from fans. At 23, Kelsey became pregnant again and gave birth to a son, Josh. The father of the child did not want to marry her or acknowledge his child. As the modeling offers dried up, Kelsey turned to social media to build an audience. She actively manages her accounts, posting revealing photos in swimsuits, lingerie, or only partially covering her private parts. Kelsey has cultivated the perfect online image. Her carefully edited photos make her look beautiful, and her social media pages showcase her visits to high-end fashion stores, trendy nightclubs, and other locations. However, this ideal online image hid the true struggles of a single mother of two. Despite her wealthy appearance, her real life was difficult, as she was a poor money manager, often spending all her income at once. Around 2016, Kelsey faced serious problems after an unfortunate incident with her daughter. The girl suffered a severe trauma that left her daughter withdrawn and unable to speak. An acquaintance advised her to take her daughter to a psychiatrist. So she contacted renowned pediatric psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Burchard, who practiced in Monterey, California, to treat her daughter. Dr. Thomas Burchard is a highly respected pediatric psychiatrist who was born on February 16, 1948, in Boston, Massachusetts. He is the son of a prominent architect and engineer, and his family later moved to Virginia. Although his father taught architecture at prestigious institutions, including Harvard, Thomas chose a different path and pursued a medical career, focusing on child psychology. After completing medical school, Dr. Thomas served as a resident in pediatric psychiatry at several leading hospitals and taught at universities across the country. He eventually settled at a public clinical hospital on California's Monterey Peninsula, where he spent more than 40 years as a pediatric psychiatrist, building an impeccable reputation for his exceptional ability to connect with young patients and handle even the most complex and severe cases. He earned his doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley. Thomas was known for being kind, sharp, and incredibly generous. His compassionate nature motivated him to help those in need, especially young patients whose parents could not afford therapy. He also paid for hospital treatment for sick children from low-income families and supported single mothers. Dr. Thomas had a longtime companion named Di, who served as an assistant, housekeeper, and possibly more. As someone who knew him well, she was the first to notice changes in his behavior that showed early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. As Dr. Thomas entered his 70s, he became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and distracted. To hide these symptoms from his colleagues, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record important information, such as names, dates, and events. He always carried a notebook in his breast pocket that contained sensitive information such as bank information, account numbers, passwords, and card PINs. When Kelsey first visited Dr. Thomas with her daughter, she expressed her difficulties as a single mother and her inability to afford his services. However, the doctor offered to provide his services for free and went on to give Kelsey $300 to help support her children. Kelsey was shocked but quickly discovered that by sharing tearful stories of her difficult life, she could extort more money from the elderly doctor. Kelsey prepared a detailed plan for her next appointment with Dr. Thomas. During the visit, she told a heartbreaking story about her youngest son's illness and lack of money to buy expensive medicine for him. She gave a specific amount of money that she needed, and surprisingly, she received the entire amount from Dr. Thomas. Kelsey continued to make up false, tearful stories in the following visits. She would make up stories of hardship and receive larger and larger amounts of money from this trustworthy doctor. Of course, she did not use the money for her children but for her own entertainment, designer clothes. Not wanting to return to her hometown of Virginia, Kelsey asked Thomas to pay for her rent in California, saying that she could find work there more easily and that the climate there was better for her children. Thomas agreed and paid for the apartment she had chosen. Some people suspected that the doctor had an affair with Kelsey, a young blonde model, and that was why he always indulged her requests. However, Kelsey claimed that Thomas treated her and her children like family and acted out of kindness, not love. Thomas provided Kelsey and her children with a home, paid their bills, and gave them a large sum of money for their necessities. He also leased her a luxury Mercedes-Benz convertible. Over time, Kelsey realized that her modeling career was over and her youth was slipping away. Despite this, she made no effort to find another job and instead relied on Dr. Thomas for financial support. During this time, he spent about $500,000 on Kelsey and her children. However, she squandered that money on personal indulgences, such as breast augmentation and liposuction, in hopes of reviving her modeling career. Kelsey's excessive spending and partying lifestyle led to her neglecting her children. This eventually led to her ex-husband, who had one sole custody of their daughter through the courts, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. As a result, Kelsey was left with only her youngest son. Thomas was furious when he discovered the situation, but his anger was directed at Kelsey, not at her ex-husband. It was clear that Kelsey had neglected her children and was using the money meant for their care to support her lavish lifestyle. Dr. Thomas decided to address the issue with Kelsey, informing her that he would no longer support her lavish and idle lifestyle. However, Kelsey responded by threatening to spread false rumors that Dr. Thomas had inappropriate feelings for his young patients. Although he knew this was a lie, Dr. Thomas realized that any further rumors about the matter could seriously damage his reputation as a respected pediatric psychiatrist and scholar. Faced with this threat, Dr. Burchard reluctantly gave in to Kelsey's demands and continued to support her financially. In 2019, Kelsey moved to Las Vegas with her son to try to revive her modeling career, and she expected Thomas, whom she was blackmailing, to fund the effort. As instructed, Thomas rented a house for her and provided the requested funds. However, after receiving the financial support, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months and her whereabouts were unknown. Later that year, in February, Kelsey reappeared, contacting Thomas in an emotional state, saying that she was seriously ill, unable to work, and in dire financial straits. When Thomas refused to help, Kelsey's attitude changed completely and she continued to threaten and blackmail him. Judy, who was close to Thomas, advised him to report Kelsey's behavior to the police and contact Child Protective Services, due to concerns about Kelsey's ability to care for her younger son, especially since she had previously lost parental rights to her older daughter. Dr. Thomas took steps to prepare in case the conflict with Kelsey escalated in court. He informed his colleagues of the situation, and they agreed to support him. Judy had previously attempted to resolve the issue by speaking directly with Kelsey. Unfortunately, her efforts only resulted in Kelsey threatening retaliation. Thomas decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims. Judy tried to dissuade Thomas, but he was adamant about traveling to Las Vegas to meet with Kelsey. Judy also offered to accompany him as a friend for support, but Dr. Thomas insisted on handling the matter himself. He finally set off on March 1, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists got lost while traveling through Nevada. While trying to get to Lake Mead, they took a dirt road off the main highway. They came across a Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the desert. The roof was closed and the windows were rolled up, but unusually, there was no one around the car. Intrigued, the tourists cautiously approached the car and saw that one of the windows was broken. Upon further investigation, they looked inside and saw signs of a struggle. There were blood stains all over the interior. The tourists quickly contacted the police to report their shocking discovery. Police arrived at the scene around noon and discovered an unbearable stench. The source of the smell was quickly identified when police opened the trunk. Inside, they found the body of an elderly man hidden under a pile of furniture and rags. Beside him was a blood-stained baseball bat. The victim was later identified as Dr. Thomas, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy reported Dr. Thomas missing on March 2nd when she was unable to reach him at their scheduled meeting time. She immediately suspected something terrible had happened and contacted the police, hoping he would be found alive. The autopsy revealed numerous serious injuries to Thomas's body. These included scratches, bruises, and superficial cuts, as well as a severe head injury that may have been caused by a baseball bat found in the trunk of the car next to him. Part of his ear was severed, and his hands had multiple cuts that suggested a desperate attempt to defend himself. Thomas's face also had noticeable bruises with a unique printed pattern. Most shocking was the evidence that the man had been placed in the trunk of the car while still alive and injured, eventually suffocating from the intense desert heat. The investigation focused on Kelsey Turner as the prime suspect, as the car at the crime scene had been rented under her name. Judy had provided the police with Kelsey's address, which matched the location Dr. Thomas had visited. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they found the house empty. Although no one was there, the house showed signs of a hasty cleanup. Containers of cleaning products were scattered throughout the house and the air smelled strongly of household chemicals, suggesting that someone had tried to erase any evidence of the crime. The house was occupied by Kelsey, her 4-year-old son, and her new boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, along with 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. All had fled, making them suspects, as Kelsey could not have inflicted such injuries on the doctor or placed his body in the trunk of her car herself. Jeremy Eric was the only person the police interviewed. He explained that he and his girlfriend had left Kelsey's house while the doctor was still alive. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had been drinking heavily and began flirting with Thomas, trying to extort money from him, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This made Kelsey extremely angry, as she accused Jeremy's girlfriend of trying to steal Thomas from her. The situation became worse, and Jeremy had to quickly move his girlfriend out of the house to avoid a fight. He did not return for several days and was unaware of what had happened after he left. During the investigation, the police learned from Judy that Dr. Thomas kept a notebook with his bank account information and passwords, which he frequently lost. When they searched, they discovered that the notebook was missing. Furthermore, 2 of Dr. Thomas's accounts showed significant withdrawals on March 3rd, after which Thomas's accounts and cards were immediately closed. On March 21st, in Stockton, California, police arrested Kelsey and her boyfriend for attempting to withdraw money again. It was later discovered that the couple had stayed in various motels with a child, paid in cash, and moved frequently. They initially attempted to drain all of Thomas's accounts but were unsuccessful. They then attempted to withdraw more money with the intention of fleeing to Mexico but were prevented by the accounts being closed. Diana, a neighbor who was at Kelsey's home that night, cooperated with police and shared her account of what happened on the night of March 7th. According to her, the trouble began after Jeremy and his girlfriend left. Kelsey had a heated argument with Dr. Thomas, who refused to give her money. Kelsey threatened to ruin the doctor's reputation by spreading rumors about his misconduct with young patients. As the argument escalated, Kelsey became aggressive. Dr. Thomas, feeling threatened, locked himself in his room. However, John broke the door open with a strong shoulder thrust and then hit Thomas hard with a baseball bat. This caused a serious injury, resulting in a large hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana rushed in, pleading with everyone to calm down. Seeing Thomas's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, fearing the consequences of their actions. After hearing Thomas say that he would tell the police that he had been attacked and robbed by strangers, the four drove to the garage. Diana was ordered by Kelsey to return to the house and clean up, removing all traces of blood. Diana followed the instructions and began cleaning, but soon heard screams and a struggle coming from the garage. She rushed back to find the couple brutally attacking Dr. Thomas in the car. The doctor was trapped and unable to escape or defend himself. It became clear that Kelsey and John had no intention of taking Thomas to the hospital. Instead, they planned to kill him with a baseball bat, a small knife, and John's empty pistol, leaving bruises on the doctor's face. Diana was instructed to return to the house and continue cleaning. Fearing for her safety, she complied and left the garage. While Diana was still cleaning, she heard the couple's car drive away. Several hours later, John's car returned with Kelsey, but the other car, a convertible, was nowhere to be seen. Diana remained unaware of the convertible's location until she heard about a car found in the desert with a body in the trunk. Diana chose to cooperate with the police from the start by agreeing to a plea deal and sharing all relevant information she knew. This decision resulted in a reduced sentence for tampering with evidence, serving just 3 years in prison. John Logan Kennison was convicted of murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Kelsey Turner's trial was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, causing significant delays in the trial. While in custody, she gave birth to a baby girl who, along with her son, was placed under the protection of social services, as none of Kelsey's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. Kelsey Turner was sentenced to 25 years in prison in January 2023, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 10 years. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Correctional Center for Women in Las Vegas. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Elizabeth Nicole Forshee-Cyperta. Elizabeth was born on May 13, 1978, in Truckee, California. She lived with her parents and younger brother. When Elizabeth was 13, the Cyperta family moved across the street. Michael and Sally Cyperta had 2 young children and were struggling to balance work and family. Michael wanted Sally to go back to work, so they decided to find a babysitter. Michael suggested hiring Elizabeth, then 14, to babysit their children. Sally agreed, and Elizabeth began babysitting for the neighbor's family. Elizabeth grew attached to Michael and Sally's children as she spent more time with them. The children also enjoyed being around her. When Elizabeth was 15, her father passed away, a traumatic event that deeply affected her. According to her mother, Donna Forshee, Elizabeth became more sensitive and vulnerable after this event. She began to admire and grow closer to Michael Cyperta, seeing him as an ideal father figure. Elizabeth believes that Michael loves his children unconditionally and supports their interests. Elizabeth used to babysit Michael and Sally's children during the day. However, she started staying at their house until late at night. This continued for about 2 years. One day, Michael decided to move to Iowa with his family to be closer to his relatives. He invited Elizabeth to come along as a babysitter. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, strongly objected and tried to stop her daughter, even calling Child Protective Services to intervene. However, Donna's efforts were in vain. Elizabeth was too attached to Michael, Sally, and their 2 children. Although she was still in high school, she was determined to stick with her decision and moved to Winfield, Iowa with Cyperta's family. After Elizabeth moved away, her mother Donna and her best friend Shannon Gerber maintained regular contact with her, either by phone or by weekly letters. Elizabeth graduated from high school in Iowa in May 1997. Donna attended her graduation and gave her daughter an emerald and diamond ring, which Elizabeth treasured. During this time, Michael divorced his wife, Sally, and began a relationship with Elizabeth. After the divorce, Sally left the children with Michael and Elizabeth and moved away. Although Sally maintained contact with her children, she cut off all contact with Michael and stopped speaking to Elizabeth. Michael, then in her 40s, immediately demonstrated his controlling nature. He limited what Elizabeth could and could not do, as well as who she could talk to. He attempted to control every aspect of Elizabeth's life. From the beginning, their relationship seemed dysfunctional. As a result, Elizabeth's mother and best friend Shannon found it increasingly difficult to contact her. Michael did not like Elizabeth talking to them and would often get angry if she did. As a result, Elizabeth would only dare to call them when Michael was not home. During this time, Elizabeth became friends with Harper Tracy through church. Harper noticed that Elizabeth had suffered 5 or 6 injuries during their friendship, including finger marks on her neck and bruises on her stomach. Harper's daughter, Sadie, who was about 7 years old, knew Michael's children through church and occasionally played at their home. Sadie remembers one time when she visited, she witnessed Michael pushing Elizabeth down the stairs and kneeling on her. Harper also remembers Elizabeth arriving at church in a state of panic and fear after fleeing a violent argument with Michael. Elizabeth confided that she was afraid of Michael and could not take any more abuse. Harper discovered multiple bruises on Elizabeth's stomach and marks on her arms. Elizabeth stayed in Harper's trailer for a month. During that time, Michael appeared near the trailer almost every day and acted threateningly. He would park his truck about 10 feet away from the trailer and tease Elizabeth. Specifically, he threatened her by saying that Elizabeth would be isolated and no one would find her if she did not listen to him. He left hazmat notices and a torn cat collar outside, along with a message warning that she would disappear like the cat if she did not return. He also threatened to harm the family's animals and began blackmailing her with videotapes and photos he had. According to Harper, he threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body 6 times. Harper called the police to stop him, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. There were clearly many warning signs about Michael. Everyone saw him as someone to stay away from. However, Elizabeth was young and naive, so she still hoped that Michael would change. Unfortunately, at the age of 40, people rarely change their behavior and attitude towards others. After a long time of pressure from Michael, eventually, Elizabeth decided to leave Harper's trail to live with Michael. They married in January 1998 in Mount Pleasant. Despite her attempts to prevent the marriage, Harper attended their wedding. Afterwards, Michael took the initiative to cut off all contact between Harper and Elizabeth. At Michael's request, Elizabeth finally told Harper not to come to their house anymore. Harper was not the only one concerned about Elizabeth and Michael's marriage. Elizabeth's mother, Donna, also disapproved of the relationship and refused to come to Iowa for her daughter's wedding. However, in June 2000, Elizabeth went to California to attend her younger brother's high school graduation. Although Michael stayed in Iowa, he continued to keep an eye on Elizabeth. During the 3 days Elizabeth stayed with her mother, Michael called her repeatedly. He was concerned that Donna was trying to influence Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. After each call, Elizabeth felt sad and confused. She considered leaving her husband but was not sure. To reassure Michael, Elizabeth moved out of her mother's house and moved in with Shannon Gerber, her childhood friend. Shannon had kept in touch with Elizabeth since Elizabeth moved to Iowa. They tried to talk every month, often calling when Michael was not home. However, Elizabeth's move to live with her friend did not lessen Michael's anger. Instead, he began harassing Shannon by calling her repeatedly. Most of the calls were threatening. Shannon recalled Michael threatening Elizabeth. He screamed at her and said he would kill her if she did not come home. Michael also threatened to kill Elizabeth's mother, younger brother, Shannon, and her young son. He called her constantly, day and night, sometimes dozens of times an hour. Finally, Shannon's husband couldn't take it anymore and turned off the phone. This clearly made Michael even angrier. Shannon begged Elizabeth not to return to Iowa. "I didn't want her to go because I was afraid I would never see her again," Shannon confided. She deliberately took a detour to the airport, hoping Elizabeth would miss her flight. However, the flight was delayed and Elizabeth was still able to catch it. After returning to Mount Pleasant, Iowa, Elizabeth began working at Experian. There, she met Sarah Thomas, a coworker who quickly became her best friend. Because Sarah lived near the Sipura family home, she often took Elizabeth home after work. During these trips, they talked a lot and Elizabeth gradually trusted Sarah. She shared with Sarah about her difficult relationship with her husband, Michael, and even showed Sarah the bruises on her body that Michael had caused. Elizabeth and Sarah became very close to each other, close enough to cause problems. One day, while Michael was away, his two children peered through the bedroom keyhole and saw Sarah and Elizabeth getting intimate. When Elizabeth discovered that the children had witnessed the scene, she hastily packed up and moved in with Sarah. When Sarah's girlfriend, Terry, went outside to walk the dog, Michael came over and asked her to call Sarah's work phone and ask Elizabeth to return home. He had a bottle of alcohol in his hand, and his children were following him and crying. Michael explained that his wife had left him, she was not answering his calls, and he did not know what to do. When Elizabeth and Sarah entered the apartment, they saw Michael and Terry waiting for them. Frightened, Elizabeth and Sarah left. Michael shouted at Terry to follow him. They got into the car and gave chase. The two couples met face to face in a nearby parking lot. Terry started fighting with Sarah because she felt betrayed. Elizabeth was sitting in the car at the time and was afraid to get out. Cursing, screaming, and threatening, Michael approached Elizabeth and dragged her out through the window of the car. During the struggle, Elizabeth suffered a lacerated rib, and her shirt got torn. Sarah and Elizabeth fled to a nearby gas station, where they reported the assault to the police. The state charged Michael with first-degree burglary and domestic abuse assault. The court approved the no-contact order protecting Elizabeth. Terry packed her things and left, so Elizabeth and Sarah started living together. Michael continued to harass Sarah despite a ban. He would sit across the street, shouting insults or verbally abusing her. Additionally, Sarah received numerous incoming phone calls, but whenever she picked up, the caller would remain silent. She filed a report with the police, who worked with her phone company to set up a trap on her line to track the origin of these calls. Over a 3-week period, from June 26th to July 16th, Sarah's phone records revealed Michael made 162 calls to her apartment. On July 16, 2000, 1 month after her breakup with Michael, Sarah left for work at 10:30 p.m. At the time, Elizabeth was asleep on the couch. Their dog was safely locked in the bathroom to avoid disturbing Elizabeth when Sarah returned home at 4 a.m. However, upon arriving back, Sarah was surprised to find that Elizabeth had vanished. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle, and Elizabeth's personal documents remained intact. The dog was still locked in the bathroom. Sarah decided to go to bed. When she awoke the next morning, Elizabeth was still missing. It became clear that Elizabeth had left without taking her purse, clothes, or other essential belongings, and she did not leave behind any note or explanation. Sarah reported Elizabeth's disappearance to the police 24 hours after first discovering she was gone. Elizabeth was 22 years old when she disappeared. The police launched an investigation, and of course, Michael was their first suspect. On July 16th, the day Elizabeth disappeared, Michael started phoning the apartment around 3 p.m., logging more than a dozen calls through the evening. He last called at 10:56 p.m., that is, he stopped making calls 26 minutes after Sarah left for work and left Elizabeth alone. On July 17th, Michael was supposed to be at work. His friend Jared agreed to watch Michael's children. Jared testified he found Michael was pretty intoxicated when he arrived at his house around 5:30 a.m. Jared said Michael told him Elizabeth had stayed overnight and left around 5 a.m. Michael decided not to go to work that morning. Police called Michael the next day, July 18th, to ask if he had heard from Elizabeth. He said he had not. On July 20th, officers came to his house to let him know Elizabeth was missing. Michael said his taking a sick day from work on July 17th, the day after Elizabeth disappeared, was a coincidence. Michael also stated that due to their breakup, he hadn't been eating and had been getting cramps. Elizabeth seemed to disappear into thin air. She didn't contact her family or friends, her bank account was untouched, and she had not even received her salary for the last month. The investigators knew that Elizabeth could not just leave without documents and money. All the friends she could have stayed with knew nothing about her whereabouts. The police interviewed residents and distributed flyers with an image and description of Elizabeth, but none of these actions gave the desired result. In early September 2000, Larry Headland, an agent with the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation, interviewed Michael. During the interview, Michael claimed that he and Elizabeth had a harmonious relationship and denied any allegations of abuse between them. When asked about the attack on Elizabeth on June 16th, Michael admitted that it was an unusual action on his part. He explained that he had been drinking and that his emotions had taken over, leading to his inappropriate actions. Initially, Michael denied making the harassing phone calls to Sarah's apartment. However, when presented with evidence from the call records, he admitted responsibility. The agent then pointed out that the calls to Michael's apartment had stopped the night Elizabeth went missing. This caused Michael to become stressed. Michael explained that he just wanted to avoid arrest and did not want to be charged or held responsible for anything. That's why he lied about the phone calls. He objected when Larry suggested that Elizabeth was dead. After this interview, the police obtained a search warrant for Michael's home. In Michael's bedroom, the police found an unlocked safe. Inside or on top of the safe, an officer found a $2,000 gold pendant that Michael had given Elizabeth and a V-shaped diamond and emerald ring that she had received from her mother as a graduation gift. Elizabeth only removed the ring when she was showering or soaking in the tub, otherwise, it was on her finger. In police photos taken after Michael attacked Elizabeth, the ring was still on her hand. Elizabeth had not been back to Michael's house since. So how did the ring end up in Michael's safe? When the police asked for an explanation, Michael said that Elizabeth must have left it behind when she moved out. However, officer pointed out that Elizabeth was still wearing the ring in a photo taken on June 16th, the day of the attack. Michael could not explain why the ring was in his bedroom. There are some suspicious points in Elizabeth's disappearance. Michael abruptly stopped contacting her on the day she disappeared, although the police only notified him 4 days later. This suggests that Michael may be hiding something. However, the police need concrete evidence to charge him. Time has passed so quickly that it is difficult to find clues. One possibility is that Elizabeth voluntarily went into hiding. But her family does not believe this. Although the case has been quiet for many years, her mother, Donna, has not lost hope that her daughter will return. Every year, she travels to Iowa, where Elizabeth used to live, to organize activities to raise awareness about her daughter's disappearance. In 2010, Donna rented a billboard with Elizabeth's picture and offered a $20,000 reward for any information about her daughter. Donna said she was concerned that something might have happened to her daughter, but she was hopeful that she would eventually be found. "Someone definitely knows what happened to my daughter, and I hope that us coming out will jog their memory," she said. 10 years after her daughter's disappearance, Donna has developed her own theories about what happened. In an interview, she said, "I think the person called her and lured her out of the apartment to meet them. Then they argued and something bad happened that night." Despite the best efforts of the police and her family, Elizabeth's fate remains a mystery. Since her disappearance in 2000, investigators have searched 79 different locations but have not found Elizabeth's body. They entered her information into the National Crime Information Center's Missing Persons database. 17 years later, in 2017, the investigation was reopened. By this time, Michael Saiperda had moved to Colorado. Police reviewed all the evidence and interviews. They discovered a key detail that had previously been overlooked. Jared, Michael's friend who was assigned to watch Michael's children on July 17, 2000, told police that when he arrived at Michael's house at 5:30 a.m., he found Michael quite drunk. According to Jared's testimony, Michael said that Elizabeth had stayed the night and left around 5 a.m. However, in previous interviews, Michael had never mentioned Elizabeth sleeping over at his house. More significantly, Elizabeth's jewelry was found in Michael's safe. Authorities decided to arrest Michael 17 years after Elizabeth went missing. Although her body was never found, investigators believe that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was the culprit. In November 2017, Michael was arrested in Colorado and extradited to Iowa, where he was charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife Elizabeth. Donna said, "This is the best news we've had in 17 years. We've waited a long time and are so glad that he's finally been arrested." Michael later waived his right to a jury trial. The loss of key physical evidence, especially the victim's body, made it significantly more difficult for prosecutors to prove guilt. Without a body, forensic experts could not determine the cause of death, and the jury could not directly observe the victim's injuries or view crime scene photos. The defense argued that the prosecutor's goal was not to find the truth, but to convict Michael by looking for inconsistencies in witness testimony. Although the trial took place 18 years after the incident, the defense acknowledged during closing arguments that a body was not required to establish a homicide. However, Michael still challenged the state's evidence of Elizabeth's death. The district court concluded that the state had proven her death beyond a reasonable doubt. The court held that any theory that Elizabeth was still alive and could reappear at any time was unrealistic. The state presented evidence that Michael was the last person to speak to Elizabeth at 10:56 p.m. on July 16, which he himself admitted. The district court noted Jared's testimony that Michael told Elizabeth to stay at his house that night. In addition, there were other suspicious circumstances. Michael unexpectedly left work on July 17 and did not call Elizabeth's apartment again, even though the police did not officially report her missing until July 20. From this evidence, the state established that Michael's hatred of Elizabeth led to murder. Because Michael was controlling and possessive of Elizabeth, it was highly likely that he intentionally caused her physical harm when she decided to leave him for someone else. The strained relationship between them was clear evidence of Michael's intentional intent to cause harm. The state presented evidence that Michael had repeatedly threatened to kill Elizabeth and dispose of her body so that no one would find it. From these repeated threats, the jury could conclude that Michael had intended to kill Elizabeth. The court reviewed the evidence and made a crucial decision. They discovered that Elizabeth had opened a new bank account just 9 days before her disappearance, but had not withdrawn her last paycheck. They concluded that she was dead. After carefully evaluating all the evidence, the court found that Michael was responsible for Elizabeth's death. On June 25, 2018, Michael Saiperda, 58, was convicted of first-degree murder. On August 23, 2018, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole and ordered him to pay $150,000 in restitution for Elizabeth's death. However, the story does not end there. In September 2020, the Iowa Court of Appeals changed Michael Sieperta's conviction from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. Judge Mary Tabor, in a 30-page ruling, noted that while there was enough evidence to conclude that Elizabeth was dead and that Michael was responsible, the prosecutor failed to prove that Michael intended to kill Elizabeth. This led to the reduced charge. The case was particularly difficult because there was no body, weapon, or crime scene. Michael asked to be released or at least given a new trial. Ultimately, the court sentenced Michael Sieperta to 50 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Justine Valdez. On May 19, 2018, Justine Valdez, 24, after completing the residency permit application process, she went to the gym to work out, finishing at around 4:20 p.m. With plans to go home, her mother, Terrace, texted her to pick up some bread on the way. Justine agreed, stopping at the store before catching the 185 bus to Bray, which departed at 6:09 p.m. The bus dropped Justine off at a familiar stop near her rural home called Ainakar Village. It usually took her 15 to 20 minutes to walk home. Although it was not a difficult journey for someone as young and active as Justine, her family became worried when she did not arrive home on time. Justine often told her family where she was and when she would be home, so her mother, Terrace, grew increasingly worried as time passed without any news from her. When Terrace tried calling and texting Justine, she did not respond. This prompted Terrace to go out and look for her. While searching, she asked strangers if they had seen Justine, describing her features and the sporty outfit that made her stand out from the crowd. Although some people saw Justine getting off the bus, no one knew where she went after that. Terrace's search for her daughter ended in frustration and growing fear. She had no idea what had happened to Justine on her way home, and with each passing moment, her anxiety grew. Terrace searched the streets, looking for Justine, but still found nothing. Justine's disappearance left her mother devastated, unable to find any trace of her daughter. Terrace, desperate, contacted the police to report the situation. The police quickly took her statement and began searching for Justine. As the police searched the area, they investigated Justine's life and social connections. It was learned that she lived with her parents, Terrace and Daniel Valdez, in the quiet rural area of Nisar, Ireland. Originally from the Philippines, Justine's parents moved to Ireland in search of a better life in 2015. Despite their difficult start, her parents worked hard to support Justine's education and life. A diligent student, Justine studied accounting at university while working part-time to support herself and help her family financially. Her part-time jobs included waitressing in Bray and babysitting for local families. Her parents, who lived in the servants' quarters of a large estate, worked for a prominent family, her mother as a housekeeper and her father as a gardener. Justine was known to be responsible, hardworking, and devoted to her family. Furthermore, her limited social circle and lack of typical teenage rebellious behavior made the idea of her running away seem implausible. When police contacted people who knew Justine, no one had any information about her whereabouts. The possibility of her running away was quickly ruled out. She was extremely close to her parents and kept them updated on her daily activities. On the day she went missing, she exchanged 63 text messages with her mother. The last of which came at 6:24 p.m. when Justine got off the bus. Police trying to find Justine received a vital tip. This led them to a disturbing incident that occurred just minutes after Justine got off the bus. A female driver reported seeing a man aggressively pushing a dark-haired Asian woman, wearing tracksuit bottoms similar to Justine, into the boot of a black Nissan Qashqai. The woman and her 12-year-old son drove past the scene and immediately called the police. Shortly after, another driver witnessed a similar alarming scene. This time, the Asian woman, who appeared to be very frightened, was seen sitting in the back of the car, knocking on the window for help. The driver who witnessed the incident discussed it with his wife when he got home, and he immediately called the police at 7:20 p.m. to report a possible kidnapping. Another driver also contacted police about a Nissan driving erratically near the scene. Police quickly arrived at the location, which the woman had called them earlier. When they arrived, they found Justine's broken phone and a bag of bread left on the side of the road, raising serious concerns for her safety. After the kidnapper tried to stuff Justine into the trunk of the car but she resisted, he forced her into the back seat and drove off to an unknown location. The suspect's black Nissan was immediately placed on the wanted list, leading to a large-scale search effort involving patrol cars and helicopters. However, the nighttime search was hampered by darkness and made no progress. The search continued as the day wore on, with police looking at witness accounts to narrow down the area where the perpetrator might be. A 40-year-old man named Mark Hennessy was identified because he matched the description of the kidnapper. Police went to his home and discovered that his wife, Nicola, did not know where he was because he had gone out drinking after work the day before. This information only added to the suspicion surrounding Mark, prompting police to investigate his background further. Mark Hennessy was a well-respected member of the community, known as a devoted husband and father to 2 young daughters, the youngest of whom was born 8 months ago in September 2017. He lived in an affluent neighborhood surrounded by other young families. His work as an estimator on construction sites provided a steady income for his family, and he had no previous run-ins with the law. However, police knew that people could often hide their true intentions behind a facade of good taste. With this in mind, the police went to the bar that Mark frequented the night before to gather more information. The staff confirmed that Mark had been there, but they said that he did not stay long. He left after drinking a beer and watching some football. Then Mark returned to the bar around midnight, his expression clearly agitated and anxious. After reviewing the security footage of the bar, the police confirmed what the staff had said. They observed Mark staying there for about 10 minutes before leaving at 5:40 p.m. Engrossed in a conversation on the phone, he quickly went to his car and drove away. Then he returned to the bar around 11 p.m. Mark returned to the bar and talked to someone he knew at the entrance for a while before leaving the bar. Police began investigating Mark's activities between 5:40 p.m. and 11 p.m. A key discovery was then made when police analyzed surveillance footage from Justine's bus route. The footage showed Mark's black Nissan following the bus, starting 30 minutes after Mark left the bar. This disturbing discovery raised further suspicions about Mark's involvement in Justine's disappearance. The search for Mark's car and the missing girl continued, and Mark became the prime suspect in Justine's abduction. Mark called his wife to say he was going away for a long time. When his family tried to convince him to turn himself in, he refused and quickly left. His parents reported to the police that they had seen Mark, and the police tried to find him. But Mark escaped. The police asked for the public's help by issuing a media appeal. They asked for anyone with knowledge of Justine, Mark, or his car to come forward. A woman who heard the appeal kept an eye out and spotted a car that looked like Mark's on the road. She followed it to Cherrywood Park and observed the driver closely, then quickly contacted the police. When the police arrived, they found a man covered in blood sitting behind the wheel of a car. Despite attempts to coax him out of the car, Mark was stubborn, brandishing a knife in a threatening manner. Faced with imminent danger, the police were forced to resort to force, resulting in Mark being shot in the shoulder. After removing him from the car, they found him conscious but still uncooperative. The police then searched the car but unfortunately did not find Justine. Mark remained silent despite being questioned several times. The medical team quickly treated him and took him to the hospital. Doctors tried to save his life, hoping that he would eventually reveal Justine's location. Unfortunately, it was discovered that the bullet had ricocheted and hit Mark in the head. Further investigation revealed a gruesome discovery: the blood on his face and body was his own, and he had several fresh stab wounds on his arms and neck. The police believe that Mark, fearing arrest, apparently used a knife from his car to attempt suicide rather than face the consequences. The police eventually caught the suspect, but instead of feeling relieved, everyone felt disappointed. They found the suspect in his car, but they still hadn't found the missing person they were looking for. A glimmer of hope came when police discovered a piece of paper at the scene. Although it was covered in blood, they could read the words "sorry" and "Pease Castle." These words suggested that this might be a clue to finding Justine. Despite this small hope, they persisted. A search was launched in a forest in South Dublin, based on a clue found near a castle. First, searchers found Justine's wallet, which contained her identification. Then, on May 21st, searchers discovered Justine's body. An autopsy revealed that she had been murdered on the night of her abduction, and that she had died from strangulation. Unfortunately, the autopsy also revealed that Justine had been sexually assaulted, adding to the brutality of her death. A toxicology report, which found trace amounts of banned substances in her system, left many questions unanswered. It is unclear how the substances entered her system or what their purpose was. However, further investigation revealed that Mark had recently consumed large amounts of these substances, adding to the mystery. It turned out that Mark was a regular user of drugs and excessive alcohol, which could have inadvertently introduced these substances into Justine's system. At the same time, Mark's family life was also beginning to fall apart due to his addiction, debt, and frequent arguments with his wife. Investigations into Mark's activities have revealed that he used the dating app Tinder to interact with multiple women and flirt with women at bars. The discovery of Mark's DNA on Justine's body further strengthened the police's suspicion that he was involved in Justine's kidnapping and murder. As the police investigated the case, they discovered that the murder was motivated by sexual desire, and Justine had unwittingly become Mark's target. He discovered Justine while he was following a bus, and took advantage of her getting off the bus, brazenly abducting her from the street without hesitation, even in the presence of multiple witnesses. An investigation into Justine and Mark's phones revealed no previous connection or communication between them. However, further analysis revealed that Mark was familiar with Justine's regular route, suggesting that her murder was premeditated. It seemed that Mark had been closely monitoring Justine's movements, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This discovery shows Mark's premeditated brutality and Justine's tragic fate. The day Justine was kidnapped, he deliberately waited at the bus stop, closely monitoring her every move, until he suddenly grabbed her. The people around were extremely shocked by this scene, as such violent crimes rarely happened in their peaceful neighborhood. Many people came to pay their condolences to Justine's family, comforting and supporting them in this time of great loss. At the funeral, heartfelt tributes were paid as white balloons floated into the sky. Some attendees wore pink t-shirts with Justine's image printed on them, a touching tribute to her memory. Justine's family decided to hold her funeral in the Philippines, her homeland, to find solace in a familiar place. Although they lived in another country for a while, they finally moved back to Ireland in 2021. By starting over in a new city and pursuing different careers, they hoped to escape the painful memories that still haunted their old home. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Susan Reinert. Susan Reinert, affectionately known as Sue, was born in 1943 in the town of Ridgeway in northwestern Pennsylvania. Her father, William Gallagher, worked as a newspaper sales manager, while her mother, Jane Gallagher, was a dedicated teacher. From an early age, Susan showed a passion for learning and a strong love of literature, suggesting that she might follow in her mother's footsteps into the field of education. While studying at Grove City College, Susan met a young Air Force recruit named Kenneth Reinhardt. Although their meeting was simple, it had a profound impact on her life. Susan and Kenneth's relationship deepened as they both pursued higher education. After much effort and determination, Susan graduated from college with a bachelor's degree. She continued her education, earning a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University. In 1965, Susan and Kenneth began their new lives after graduating from Grove City College. Because Kenneth was in the military, they had to move around a lot. They started by moving to Sacramento, California, then returned to the Northeast and lived in Rome, New York. The family even lived in Puerto Rico for a while before settling permanently in the Philadelphia area in 1971. In 1974, Susan Reinhardt, a devoted teacher and loving mother, experienced a turning point when she and Kenneth decided to divorce. The divorce was amicable, without legal disputes. Susan then became an active single mother, focusing on building a home for her two children, Karen and Michael. With her warm and friendly personality, she was well liked by her colleagues and students at Chestnut Walled Elementary School. In addition to her teaching career, Susan was actively involved with Parents Without Partners, especially in the Valley Forge program. After her mother passed away, Susan found strength and support from this organization despite her grief. Despite many challenges, she persevered through her involvement with Parents Without Partners. Susan's story took a mysterious turn. On June 22, 1979, Susan Reinhardt and her two children spent their day together. That morning, her son, Michael, had been with his father, Kenneth. That evening, they had attended a father-son baseball game. However, the game ended early when Susan picked Michael up at 8:30 p.m. That evening, Susan contacted her ex-husband's parents, Florence and John Reinhardt. Despite their divorce, she had maintained a good relationship with them. Susan checked the gas tank and found it was nearly full, enough for the trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town about an hour's drive north. The purpose of the trip was to attend a single-parent conference and spend the weekend with her children. Susan had signed up to run a workshop there and keep the children involved in activities throughout the weekend. They planned to leave on Saturday morning and return home late Sunday. At around 9 p.m. on Friday night, Karen and Michael were playing outside, picking up hailstones left over from a summer storm. About 30 minutes later, neighbors heard Susan's orange-red Plymouth Horizon start. Minutes later, the car disappeared. Susan had left the house with her two children, possibly to visit her boyfriend before going to the conference. She was in a long-term relationship with William Bradfield, a fellow teacher. Although they tried to keep it a secret, the relationship was causing tension in Susan's marriage to Kenneth. There were even rumors that Susan and William might get married. On June 22, 1979, Susan and her children set off after visiting her boyfriend. They planned to travel to Allentown, about 49 miles north, to spend the night at a motel. However, they never arrived. Susan and her children disappeared without a trace, leaving those who knew and loved them distraught. On June 25, 1979, Susan's Plymouth hatchback was discovered in the parking lot of the Host Inn in Harrisburg, 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, Susan's lifeless body was found in the back of the car. The details of her agonizing death were gruesome. Her body was naked, beaten, and bound with chains, curled up in the wheel well of the car. Her hands were tied, and she had black eyes. She had been beaten with chains or tied so tightly that the chains left bruises on her back. More frighteningly, she had been injected with a fatal dose of morphine. The whereabouts of her two children, however, were unknown. They had seemingly disappeared without a trace. Police searched for hours. But no one had seen them, nor had any of Susan's friends or relatives seen them that weekend. So, the police began investigating further. They posted pictures of the Reinert family in newspapers for weeks, looking for any clues about the children. The investigation discovered that Susan had named William Bradfield, the man she thought she was going to marry, as the beneficiary of $730,000 in life insurance policies. This raised suspicions that her children might have been murdered so he could receive the money. However, William Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was in Cape May, New Jersey, the weekend Susan was murdered and her children went missing. Several teachers were present and confirmed his whereabouts. The police then turned their attention to Upper Merion High School, where Susan worked, as the school was experiencing problems. Principal Jay Smith was embroiled in a scandal. He had served as principal until he was fired the previous year after being arrested at a local shopping center. In his Ford Granada, police discovered loaded handguns, a balaclava, and burglary tools. More disturbingly, a syringe containing morphine was found in the trunk. Jay had been struggling before that. His wife, Stephanie Smith, was diagnosed with malignant cancer and died in August 1979, after several hospitalizations. During this time, Stephanie Smith began keeping a diary, documenting her husband's strange behavior, which became increasingly worse. Jay became involved in intimate groups and changed sexual partners, which Stephanie Smith did not approve of, and this seemed to lead to even more disturbing behavior. In September 1977, Stephanie Huntsberger, the adult daughter of the couple, moved in with her parents along with her husband, Edward Huntsberger. They settled into the Smiths' home in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, that fall. Stephanie Smith was battling cancer, which caused turmoil in the family and seemed to increase tensions among them. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law, were struggling with heroin addiction and had difficulty finding and keeping jobs before deciding to move back in with their families. Moving in with their parents was a desperate attempt to escape drugs. In early 1978, Jay Smith's daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Huntsberger and Edward, mysteriously disappeared. They had moved in with Jay Smith and his wife just a few months earlier. They was last seen in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. When they left, they promised to return soon, but then they disappeared. Their disappearance was first noticed when Edward failed to show up for a meeting with his probation officer later that month. Authorities contacted Jay Smith, the last person known to have had contact with the couple. Jay Smith told people that Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger had run away to California. He said they owed money to some drug dealers in the area and had fled to the West Coast. However, he was unable to provide any further information about the incident. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger lived a nomadic life, so their disappearance went unnoticed for some time. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for burglary. When police searched Jay's home, they found several suspicious items, including weapons, drugs, security uniforms, badges, and pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and office supplies stolen from a nearby school. Jay was suspected of being involved in recent armed robberies. During the burglary trial, Jay's friend William testified that they were on vacation when the robberies occurred. However, the jury did not believe this testimony. Jay had a bad reputation in Upper Merion and was known as the Prince of Darkness. Jay Smith was eventually sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison on June 25, 1979, for a series of store robberies that took place in the late 1970s. During the investigation, Jay was arrested for burglary. Although Jay was in custody, the police still considered him a prime suspect in Susan's murder and continued to investigate his past. They made a remarkable discovery: Jay's daughter and son-in-law had also disappeared under similar circumstances as Susan and her 2 children. This led the police to suspect that there might be a connection between the 2 disappearances, Susan's death and the disappearance of her children. First, Susan had been killed by a morphine overdose, and a large amount of morphine had been discovered in Jay's home several months earlier. Second, a plastic comb with Jay's identification had been found in Susan's car. The disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law closely resembled the disappearance of Susan's children. The events that unfolded in this case were shocking and left a lasting impact on the public. However, the most shocking truth was yet to be revealed. In late July 1979, about a month after Susan's body was found near Harrisburg, investigators discovered a potential motive for the horrific murder that was financial gain. On July 20, 1979, a Philadelphia attorney filed a motion to stay the execution of Susan's will in both Montgomery County and Delaware. The motion was filed on behalf of Kenneth Reinert, Susan's ex-husband, and Patrick Gallagher, her brother. The purpose of this legal action was to give both men an opportunity to review the contents of Susan's will before it was executed. They decided to file in both counties because Susan's residence in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, was near the county line, allowing her to file her will in both places. It was later discovered that just a few weeks before her death, Susan had made several significant changes to her will. She had also purchased several large life insurance policies, naming her current boyfriend, William, as the beneficiary. In the legal documents, she referred to him as her future husband. As the police investigated further, they determined that Susan's death occurred between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24, 1979. William and other teachers arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday and remained there until the afternoon of Monday, June 25. However, it was unclear exactly where William was during the time of Susan's disappearance, casting doubt on his alibi. The investigation also revealed that Susan had withdrawn large sums of money from her account, totaling approximately $25,000, through multiple transactions due to daily limits. She told the bank staff that she intended to invest the money in high-yield investments managed by William, whom she referred to as her future husband. What Susan did not expect was that she was just one of many women in William's life. He was secretly dating several other people, including a coworker who taught English, with whom he had maintained a secret relationship for nearly 10 years. William had promised Susan that the investments would yield large returns to finance their upcoming wedding and move to England. During the investigation, investigators found fake stocks and bonds in Susan's home, which initially puzzled them. They later discovered that William had sold these fake securities to Susan and then passed them on to her. These securities were mostly related to fictitious and worthless companies, suggesting that William had been deceiving Susan for a long time. This discovery added a new dimension to the case, further clarifying William's financial motives. In March 1980, William was called to testify in a civil lawsuit. During his first appearance, he refused to answer questions directly and referred questions to his legal counsel. Although William's attorneys denied that he had taken Susan's money, they were willing to negotiate with the state to settle the matter and handle Susan's $1 million will. By June 1980, William had officially testified in court for the first time. He denied most of the allegations related to the case, insisting that his relationship with Susan was not as serious as she had told her relatives. He also denied any plans to marry Susan later that year, contrary to what Susan had shared with her close friends. William made unsubstantiated allegations about Susan's relationship with Jay Smith, the former principal of Upper Marion High School, although there was no evidence to support these claims. On the contrary, many of Susan's relatives and friends confirmed her long-term relationship with William. It should be noted that Jay Smith was in prison during the trial. William did not explain why Susan chose him as the heir to her $1 million-plus estate. Instead, he described Susan as unreliable and troubled. William also blamed Susan for her problems and claimed that he was only helping to solve her problems, especially in the civil lawsuit over the missing $25,000. In June 1980, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a separate lawsuit. They wanted to recover the entire $450,000 insurance policy that Susan had received a few weeks before her death. The intention was to put the money in a trust fund to conduct their own investigation. The case was complicated and full of unexpected events. On February 20, 1981, William was arrested by the police on 3 charges, 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy. He was accused of keeping $25,000 that Susan had given him to invest. William was released on bail on February 23, 1981, but his criminal trial was scheduled to begin the following month. Before the criminal trial began, the civil case was closed. It was decided that $36,000 from Susan's estate would be used to further investigate the children's clothing and settle a dispute over the remainder of her will. This prevented William from receiving any money on August 3, 1981. William's criminal trial lasted 5 days and ended with a guilty verdict on the theft charge. Delaware County District Attorney Edward Weiss then asked that William's bail be increased from $25,000 to $75,000. The reason was that they believed this sentence increased the risk of William fleeing, especially since there was a possibility that he would be charged with murder. Judge Robert A. Wright granted this request. On April 6, 1983, William was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police on several felony charges, including 3 counts of murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to kidnap, and obstruction of justice. The jury concluded that William knew about the plan to kill Susan and her children and was involved in the crimes. Although J. Smith was believed to be involved, he was not charged at the time. Part of the indictment was based on the testimony of Proctor Noel, a fellow inmate, who stated that during a game of chess, William confessed to his involvement in the murders. The arrest of William Bradfield in April 1983 was a major step in the investigation of the case. Although there was no physical evidence linking William to Susan Reinert's death or the disappearance of her children, prosecutors were confident in the case. William's previous burglary convictions and his connection to the suspected body dumping led to more serious charges in the 1980s. J. Smith, who was serving time for other crimes, was forced to testify before a grand jury despite invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. William Bradfield was also called to testify in 1984, but details of his testimony have not been released. The hearing was reportedly related to the disappearances of Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law. In April 1985, Jay was asked to provide handwriting samples to compare with old documents that might be related to the plan to kill Susan Reinert. This investigation led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan Reinert's body was found. Jay was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and held in custody while awaiting trial. In 1984, Joseph Wambaugh, a well-known crime author, published a book about the case. The book supported the theory that Jay was the killer. A television movie based on the book was later produced, bringing the case to national attention. Jay maintained his innocence throughout his imprisonment. He appealed and accused William Bradfield of framing him. In 1989, the court reviewed the case and found problems with the indictment, leading to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a more thorough investigation. In 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, overturning the murder conviction and finding the prosecution guilty. For the next 2 decades, the state did not retry the case, allowing Jay to live out his life in freedom. William Bradfield continued to evade liability and refused to pay the $25,000 owed to Susan Reinert's estate. The case dragged on until 1996. Jay sued the state and Joseph Wambaugh for defamation and conspiracy, but both lawsuits were dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, after more than 10 years in prison, was found unconscious in his cell and died of cardiac arrest. Susan's ex-husband, Kenneth Reiner, died in June 2002 without knowing the fate of his two missing children. Jay Smith, who was exonerated in 1992, wrote a book about his case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009. However, the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, remains unsolved to this day. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett was an 8-year-old girl who had just finished school for the day. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who worked hard to ensure that her daughter was happy and well taken care of. Elaine juggled multiple jobs to support their family and give Jennifer a joyful childhood. With all the love and attention she received, Jennifer grew into a bright and cheerful child, showing a strong enthusiasm for learning and a natural curiosity at such a young age. Jennifer mentioned that children often fear the dark, and she was no different. She admitted that she was afraid of the dark and often slept in the same room as her mother. She recalled that from what she could remember about her childhood, she just didn't like the dark or sleeping alone, and so she felt comforted by going to bed with her mom. She stated that it was just the two of them, and they relied on each other. That night, on August 9, 2009, Jennifer and her mother, Elaine, shared a room. Jennifer was restless, tossing and turning and occasionally kicking her mom, which made it hard for Elaine to fall asleep. At 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to return to her own room since she had to get up early for work. In response, Jennifer said, "Mom, I love you, so I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went back to her room. Elaine would later deeply regret this decision, but at that moment, she had no way of knowing what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine found that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She saw that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she explained that she hadn't heard any sounds or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It's important to note that their apartment was on the first floor, and Jennifer's windows overlooked the parking lot. This made Elaine worry that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered her room through the window. Elaine understood that their apartment wasn't the best place for her and her young daughter, but it was all they could afford at that time. However, Elaine's parents stepped in to assist her and their granddaughter by buying a small house nearby and renovating it. Jennifer and her mother were set to move into the new house in a few months. The day before Jennifer went missing, they had been working in the garden there, where Jennifer had been bitten by mosquitoes, making it difficult for her to sleep peacefully that night. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was heartbroken. She expressed that Jennifer was her only child and begged for her safe return. The police dedicated themselves to finding her. Fortunately, Elaine received news sooner than expected. Later that day, around 6:30 p.m., the police got a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and discovered something alarming. To their shock, they realized it was a young girl. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett's body in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer was in a serious condition, but she was still breathing. She had a deep cut across her throat. The most life-threatening injury was this wound, which led to significant blood loss and left her very pale and weak. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors worked hard to save her life. One doctor recalled that when he first saw Jennifer in the emergency room, she was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, and covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. He mentioned that she couldn't make any sounds because of the injury to her neck. Fortunately, he added that after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. He stated that they had completed her surgery, her airway was stable, and she wasn't bleeding, so they were very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. She later recounted that she had been kind of a hard patient to deal with because she had a lot of male doctors, and she was scared of males. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to comfort her daughter by explaining that everyone present was there to help her. Despite this, Jennifer remained distrustful of those around her. Her behavior became clearer when she disclosed what had happened to her that night. An investigator noted that they knew they had a survivor who couldn't speak and that the challenge was getting information from her. After all, she was only 8 years old, so it was tough. Because Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigator, the detectives provided her with a notebook and pens. They asked her to write down her answers to their questions. Jennifer communicated through notes to her mother, who then relayed the note to the officer. Surprisingly, her written responses were very detailed and accurately described the events. Despite her young age, Jennifer demonstrated impressive intelligence. According to the note, that night, Jennifer entered her room, turned on the light, and picked up a book to read, hoping it would make her sleepy. It worked, and she soon fell asleep. Suddenly, she woke up to find the stranger carrying her out of the house. She said that he was running with her down the sidewalk and that she tried to scream, but he covered her nose and mouth. Afterward, he put her in a car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. Immediately, Jennifer felt that something was off, as she noticed her mother's car in the parking lot, which left her puzzled about their destination. While she understood that police are generally trusted, her mother had always warned her not to trust strangers. Jennifer recalled that as a child, she had wanted to believe the stranger, but the lessons she had learned about strangers in school, along with her fear of the dark, told her that something was seriously wrong. When they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer suggested that he could drop her off there, but he replied that he couldn't because they were not home. At that moment, she realized that he was lying since their car was parked in the driveway. The man had stopped near Jennifer's school, which was about 3 kilometers from her house. He had told her to watch the moon closely and said that when it changed color, her mother would arrive to pick her up. Jennifer recalled waiting anxiously for her mother's headlights, but they never appeared. At that moment, she sensed that the man was mentally preparing himself for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger remarked that her mom wasn't coming, so they needed to go farther. He then drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street and stopped the car. Jennifer once again sought confirmation that he was a genuine policeman. She mentioned that she was questioning him and needed him to prove he was an officer. She asked him where his gun and badge were. He responded that his gun was in the back seat of the car. As Jennifer turned to look for it, the suspicious officer removed her underwear. Jennifer lost track of time while in the stranger's grip because she passed out. She only became aware of her surroundings again when he was pulling her by her ankles through the field. Despite the intense pain caused by twigs and stones pressing into her back, she acted as if she were dead and remained silent, knowing that this was her opportunity to survive. He eventually released her feet and left her alone in the field. Jennifer heard him walking away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the engine starting as he drove off. She realized that she couldn't scream and didn't understand why. She managed to place her right hand on her neck and felt a deep wound. Looking at her hand, she saw it covered in blood. Since the exact time of her disappearance was unknown, it was thought that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. As the sun set, she noticed the lights of passing cars nearby. She heard children's voices and a dog that approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but the owner never came. During this time, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay awake. Jennifer stated that every time she regained consciousness, she was shocked that she was still alive. She said she wasn't afraid and had accepted that she might not survive. Suddenly, she heard children's voices nearby, and then something hit her leg. When Jennifer next regained consciousness, she heard a police officer saying, "You've been found. You're going to be okay. Just please stay with me." She remembered being loaded into the life flight helicopter. This experience was very difficult for young Jennifer because she couldn't speak and had to communicate by writing everything down. Her fear of men added to the tension, so her mother asked the questions, and Jennifer's responses were passed on to the officers outside the door. Remarkably, 8-year-old Jennifer was able to get the stranger's name. "I just remember recalling his name, so I wrote that he said his name was Dennis. I remember thinking he looked greasy and that he might have had a scar or something on his face." For days after Jennifer went missing, the police enlisted the help of forensic expert Lois Gibson. She communicated with Jennifer using gestures and notes. Despite these difficulties, they created a detailed composite sketch of a man, which was released to the public in hopes of receiving information. While this was happening, police searched the crime scene and discovered Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Unfortunately, DNA testing on the clothing did not yield any matches to a suspect. Jennifer's recovery took time, but she demonstrated incredible strength for someone her age. There was a particularly tough moment when she became upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and made a faint sound. Doctors were surprised because her vocal cords had been nearly severed, and they didn't expect them to heal, yet they started to recover. Soon after, Jennifer was released from the hospital. She returned home and resumed her studies. After finishing school and college, she chose to become a children's librarian. However, she never forgot the traumatic events of that night. Every day felt like a search for her attacker. She wondered if he could be anyone around her. Could it be our new neighbor? Someone at the post office or the grocery store? Is he watching us? Will he come back to finish what he started? Fortunately, Jennifer met a man named Jonathan, and for the first time in years, she felt she could trust someone. They fell in love. Meanwhile, the investigation into her attacker stalled. The chances of finding him diminished as time passed, and the case remained unresolved, moving from one investigator to another without progress. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. She learned that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over her case and that he wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. He told her that he would do whatever he could in his power until the end of his career to get her the answers she needed for the case. Tim decided to involve FBI Special Agent Richard Renison in the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas Police Department before joining the FBI. Together, Tim and Richard uncovered a significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Key pieces of evidence included Jennifer's underwear, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on these items to the lab in Quantico, Virginia. While detectives recognized that DNA analysis technology had improved significantly over the past 19 years, they also knew that the age of the case would make it less of a priority in the lab. Investigating cold cases often comes with the challenge of time, as witnesses forget, people move away, and some may even pass away. However, one advantage of this case's age was the advancements in DNA technology that could aid their investigation. A year later, their efforts were finally recognized. The man whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the same name that Jennifer had identified years earlier. Remarkably, the 8-year-old girl had been extremely precise in her descriptions. Despite being on pain medication, unable to speak, and only 8 years old, she wrote down the name Dennis. This was a significant indication of her accuracy. In fact, It later became clear just how precise she was about many details. Dennis Bradford, now 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA had been entered into the national database after he assaulted a woman in a bar in 1996. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison but only served 4. On February 4, 2000, he was conditionally released, and less than a year later, he was arrested for driving under the influence, just half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison looked into the connection between a suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and Dickinson, Texas, a small town. They discovered that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses located within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To verify that he was the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the photo, they were shocked because it resembled the composite sketch made with input from 8-year-old Jennifer. One detective asked if Dennis had ever heard the name Jennifer Schuett, to which he replied affirmatively. The detective then inquired if Dennis had ever had the occasion to come into contact with her, and the suspect again confirmed this. When asked to elaborate, Dennis hesitated, stating that it was a lot to explain, but he believed that if the detective were to see her, he would be extremely proud of her. Finally, and the suspect stated that Jennifer was alive, repeating that she was alive. The detective reacted with disbelief, exclaiming, "Oh God." The suspect responded by saying that the detective had no idea how hard he had prayed for that, mentioning that he was a believer in Christ but had no idea about her status. He added that it was just about 2 days later when he ran away and took off. Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He claimed he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't remember why he had stopped near her apartment, and didn't understand why he had acted so cruelly towards her. Bradford also shared a significant detail that investigators were unaware of. After the attack, he felt intense guilt. He wanted to pull the trigger but ultimately changed his mind. Following this, he was admitted to a psychiatric ward, which was the same hospital where Jennifer was still receiving treatment at that time. He had been very close to her at that time. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years had been arrested. Jennifer expressed that when they called her that morning and told her that they had really arrested Dennis Bradford, it was the most moment of her life and meant everything to her. She conveyed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise and, above all, wanted to thank Detective Tim Cromie from the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison from the FBI for all their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half. She emphasized that their promise from day one, never giving up on her case and hearing her voice while seeing her determination, meant a lot to her. Jennifer also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom since he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to select the court date and chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack. She mentioned that she remembered staying up late, endless nights, trying to perfect her victim impact statement, writing, erasing, and writing again, just trying to perfect what she wanted to say. She said that she had 19 years worth of things to say to that person. However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, Dennis hung in his jail cell, which made her feel that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away. Jennifer went to Dennis's grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court, stating that Dennis Bradford had chosen the wrong little 8-year-old girl to try and murder because for 19 years, she had thought of him every single day and had helped in searching for him. She expressed that in her heart, she knew he was out there, and now she realized that by listening to her heart all those years and never giving up on finding him, she had been right. After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and wondered if Dennis had heard her. At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg, and she took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Jennifer reflected on her experiences, mentioning that despite the horrific events caused by Dennis's actions, she faced yet another challenge in her life. She explained that as a result of the trauma, she almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, she noted that amidst the darkness, there were shining examples of kindness, particularly from Dr. Craig Witz, who, after hearing her story, generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. She shared that at the end of 2012, she and her partner welcomed their daughter Jenna and later their son Jonah, expressing her disbelief by saying that it felt like a dream and questioning who would have thought that they would really be her happy ending. The criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, but he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She mentioned that they have gone through something in life that they can talk about, and she believes it is worth sharing it with others to instill hope. She expressed her hope that this would inspire others to use their voice to help someone else. Jennifer also added that, in the end, she is not a victim but instead victorious.